One, two, one, two.
This afternoon we'll be having straight up conversations. It's a session where you get can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. So it's a session where you will have the opportunity to ask questions to our ministers of government based on the strategic areas that you were reviewing this morning. And those areas are, give me one second, enhancing youth economic participation, optimizing youth social and intellectual capital, prioritizing inclusive and active youth participation across all development sectors in Angola, creating safe spaces, peaceful communities, and nurturing environments, providing access to quality holistic health services and promoting well-being, emphasizing youth engagement in achieving Angola's food security goals, supporting youth action on climate change, environmental sustainability, and disaster mitigation. And the final one, improving the institutional arrangements and policy environment for positive youth development in Angola. Now, before we delve into that, we're going to have Ms. Farah Banks come and give her report based on the two sessions we had prior. So, Ms. Banks.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My concern when she looked at me was that the protocol hadn't been established when we had the ministers of government and opposition members join us. Honorable Premier, Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Harrigan, Webster, sorry. Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster. That was for Melissa Harrigan, I'm sorry. Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, Minister of Social Development, Ms. Deanne Kentish Rogers, Leader of the Opposition, Mrs. Cora Richardson Hodge, Member of the Opposition, Mr. Jose Vanterpool, all other invited guests, dignitaries, and everyone else in this room and listening via the internet and everywhere else so that I can cover all protocol areas. Good afternoon, and my job is to give a synopsis of what happened this morning. Most of us would have been here, but the ministers are new, and so I want to basically share with them what was discussed this morning and shared, especially during the panel discussion that was held virtually. So we began with the Dean of the National Youth Ambassador Corps, Mr. Kasim Ford, praying over the day's proceedings, followed by my colleague, Rapporteur Felicia Hennis, giving a synopsis of yesterday's happenings. The virtual panel discussion that followed was co-chaired by Mr. Ford and Attorney General in the Anguilla Youth Parliament, Ms. Janine Phillips. Youth policy expert and consultant, Mr. Henry W. Charles, who is in Trinidad, was the main presenter yesterday and is largely responsible for the production of the draft National Youth Policy, and he returned virtually as the first speaker of the panel. Mr. Charles made a passionate plea to governments, not only in Anguilla but all regional governments, to take the youth seriously and see them as a valuable asset. We cannot achieve sustainable development goals unless we have youth involved, he stated, and admonished us to bring young people front and center of the development. Youth leaders, he said, must not rest on the fact that they are young. They should work and do the research. He begged them to inform themselves to enhance their capacity and better advocate on their own behalf. Mr. Charles went on to state that stakeholder engagement is critical in this initiative. It is about working together, he said. According to him, Anguilla has some very progressive young people who are always advocating for youth development, reflected in the government of Anguilla of today and persons in youth organizations here. The second speaker, Mr. Lane Robinson of the Commonwealth Secretariat, he began by explaining what the Commonwealth Youth Program is, stating that it has focused on youth issues for over 45 years. The Commonwealth Secretariat works with governments to ensure that they're doing the best for young people by implementing policies and programs. Young people are not a problem to be fixed, Mr. Robinson stated. They're not only to be used as tools, they have something meaningful to add value to the country's development. He told this morning's attendees that they, you, are the ones who will and must do what needs to be done to move Anguilla forward, and encouraged us all by asking us a lot of questions that made us think. How do you measure progress in youth development over years? Across the Commonwealth, young people have a variety of interests. How do you use that capacity for the greater good of member states? He encouraged the youth to network and connect with similar focused or like-minded organizations and associations across the region. Outside of the youth program, he said there are other ways that young people can get involved. An example was through scholarships. There are also programs for athletes, nurses, those focusing on local government issues, and many others from interested young people to get involved. Involvement can help them or you to grow your capacity in the wider world, he said. He concluded by outlining a 12-step approach for ensuring that this is done. Implementation of these is the way forward for Anguilla, or there will be a society where young people remain at the margin and not at the center of development. Mrs. Kimberly Gittins of the Caribbean Development Bank spoke next. She had already visited Anguilla and had worked with the Department of Youth and Culture on the Job Link-Up program, as well as with the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School. Ms. Gittins said that the CDB recognized the need for scaled-up investment. Young people have a right to be involved in their development. The youth strategy policy that the bank approved this year identified 3 pillars: social, economic, and environmental resilience. The CDB had already done work in Anguilla, currently working with the ACC Development Project, that's the Anguilla Community College, to institutionally strengthen the ACC. And in 2019, Shamar Gaskin of Anguilla was part of the CDB flagship program that targets youth. Key to all this work is not duplicating that which has already been produced. Partnership is imperative. The CDB commits and shared their commitment to creating frameworks where young people can have strategic input and meaningful participation on all levels. Michelle Small-Bartley of the Caribbean Community and Common Market, CARICOM, shared her presentation on the CARICOM Youth Development Program, describing what it is and its support of Anguilla's youth development agenda, as well as CARICOM's commitment to Anguilla on a whole. Investing in youth now for tomorrow's community was a phrase she shared, and then endorsed a phrase that had been earlier used: nothing about us without us. Ms. Small-Bartley highlighted a core area used in the youth development program called CARICOM Youth Development Action Plan, or CDAP. The purpose of CDAP is to provide a policy guide for the development of national youth policies across the region, and it helps to promote youth mainstreaming and integration. She shared that the CDAP, which was created in 2012, is currently being revised. This emanates from research done on the challenges being experienced by young people. And the changes now happening at the global level means that there are now a number of additional things that young people are going through, and so they are updating the CDAP to reflect this. In speaking on what support could be given to Anguilla's youth development agenda, Ms. Small-Bartley shared that there is a continuous dialogue between CARICOM, the CARICOM Youth Development Project that is, and DYC, the Department of Youth and Culture here in Anguilla. Next year, they will be taking on capacity building of youth workers so that they can assist young persons to find employment. She shared that there was a consultation between the two, that's CARICOM and DYC, as recently as last Thursday. Ms. Small-Bartley ended her presentation with a quote from Franklin D. Roosevelt: "We cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future." The final presenter this morning in the panel discussion was Yoshabel Durand of the OECS Human and Social Development Unit. According to Ms. Durand, for the OECS, they see the Commission's role as a facilitator. They're interested in developing the capacity of anyone working with the youth, believing in a collaborative approach. There are 5 pillars to the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS Youth Strategy: youth engagement, wealth creation, education and training, health and wellness, and social and sustainable development. She expounded on all of these. Ms. Durand shared the vision of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, a decent quality of life for all citizens of the OECS throughout their lifespan. The panel's presentations were followed by a question and answer segment that will continue now with the ministers and opposition members. And Felicia and I will prepare a more comprehensive report within the coming days to be shared with the Ministry of Social Development and the Department of Youth and Culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. And now it is that time to get into the Straight Up Conversations. So, as I was mentioning earlier, that Straight Up Conversations was initially a meeting with the National Youth Council, the National Youth Ambassador Corps, and ministers of government around the table. But now it has evolved to a setting like this where more people can be involved and ask questions. So, your questions will be regarding the 8 pillars of the new draft in the National Youth Policy. And to just repeat what was mentioned earlier, the strategic areas are enhancing youth economic participation, optimizing youth social and intellectual capital, prioritizing inclusive and active youth participation across all development sectors in Anguilla, creating safe spaces, peaceful communities, and nurturing environments, providing access to quality holistic health services and promoting well-being, emphasizing youth engagement in achieving Anguilla's food security goals, supporting youth action on climate change, environmental sustainability, and disaster mitigation, and the final one, improving the institutional arrangements and policy environment for positive youth development in Anguilla. But before we get into the questions, Devon will now introduce our ministers.
Good afternoon once again. So I'll be starting from the far right. So we have Mr. Kenneth Hodge, Honorable Minister of Home Affairs. Next, we have Premier Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster, Honorable Minister of Health and Finance. Mr. Hayden Hughes, Honorable Minister of Infrastructure, Utilities, Telecommunications, and Tourism. Ms. Deanne Kentish Rogers, Honorable Minister of Social Development and Education. And now we're going to the opposition. So Mrs. Cora Richardson Hodge, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Joseph Vanderpool, Honorable Member of the Opposition. Today, the moderators for today are Trishan Gums, Melissa Harrigan, and myself, Devon Carter. So we'll be starting with the questions.
Before we get into questions, I know I keep saying before we get into questions, but we are giving the ministers the opportunity to say a brief introduction if you would like. No? Okay. Let's get straight.
I think he's...
Oh, okay. Do you have a mic?
So I'd say good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here and, to see such bright, young, and such potential sitting in front of us and next to me because, as you can see, I'm the only one up here with gray hair. So, it's good also to see, last time we were here, we were doing the debates and Neil Gums, he was doing the grilling, so I hope that you guys have muzzled him today so he doesn't ask too many questions, But I just want to say that this is something that is very important. We have to make sure that, I heard earlier where it says take youth seriously, and that is something that we do as an administration, and that is apparent by, as you see, who is involved in government and even in the opposition, that, we believe that youth, as the Honorable, as Deanne Kintish-Rogers said yesterday in her statement, that youth are not the future, the youth are now. And I think that it is important to know that your government considers that to be the case. And we believe that the youth have to be involved, because whatever decisions are made now will impact on you more than it impacts on us, because we are on our way out. And so this is your time to take responsibility for this, your own, ideas, what you would like to see happen in this country of yours. I know that it's all too easy to say, well, you take the next plane or boat out and you don't look back. That is not what we want to see happen in Anguilla. We believe that the brain drain has caused significant damage, as it is right now, to the future of this country. And we want to have that reverse migration where Anguillians start coming back home. But you are the ones who have to set that example and make sure that this country is going in the right direction, so that you make your life better, your well-being is protected, and that your children will have a place that they can call home. I thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. It is indeed a pleasure being here this afternoon. I would like to adopt the protocol already established and to indicate that it is an absolute pleasure for me to be here this afternoon and sharing in this activity. Many, many years ago, I was also a youth, and I can still remember those days. My areas of responsibility, just for easy reference, will be immigration, labor, lands and surveys, physical planning, Radio Anguilla, and constitutional affairs. And I await your grilling this afternoon. Please be nice. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I would also like to adopt the protocol previously established. I know Mr. Gums gave us this mic, but it's a whole lot better looking mic. So we're going to use this mic. Adding to what the Premier just said about the youth being the future and the brain drain impacting us. Many years ago, when I too was a youth, believe it or not, I too was a youth, I read a book that was written by Walter Rodney, and it spoke about how Europe underdeveloped Africa. And how Europe underdeveloped Africa was 300 years of taking the best and brightest out of Africa and shipping them to what they considered the New World. So over those 300 years in subsequent colonialism, the brain drain of Africa impacted them so much so that today they have not recovered. And even in these small microeconomies, we continue to wrestle with economic growth and creating opportunities for young people. But it's not only the government who have to create economic opportunities for young people, but young people also have to come to the government with their ideas and then see how the government can facilitate and enable you to have a place in Anguilla that you can call your own. There are many ideas that come from young people. And in the past, before we had so many young people sitting at the table, those ideas were shunned upon. And I remembered even myself, from my own personal experience, over 25 years ago, I decided that I would embark on a business, a fitness center. And I'm still in my 40s, so 25 years ago tells you how young I was. And everyone said that that's a stupid idea. You young people are always coming up with stupid ideas. But I stuck by it. And even though it was not facilitated by the powers that be, or even adults around me, it's 25 years ago, it still stands today. So you may come up with a novel idea that none of us are thinking about because government don't have the monopoly on ideas. And what I have found from being a youth in my past life is that that is when the ideas come. You know, when you're young, I mean, I remember coming in in campus B auditorium, and a young fella by the name of Jibril Lewis Claren came up with a concept of generating electricity from wave action. And everybody was like fascinated, but was like throwing out of the road. And he was still a high school student. And now today he's almost in the realm of middle age status. And it has gone into a concept, into a prototype that can really see the generation of electricity and the transformation of electricity realized. So, as I said before, young people, bring your ideas. You know, you have real meaningful seat at the table. You know, and some of the young people are not here because one of our colleagues, his mom, suddenly passed yesterday, and remember him in your prayers, the Honorable Merrick Richardson. And but bring your ideas and let us see how together we can ensure that those ideas come to a realization where you can see the economic and other benefits that comes from your ideas and developing your own business opportunities.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was trying to avoid the introductory stage, but I guess I still got caught into it. Nevertheless, it's a pleasure to be here at the 13th Annual National Conference on Youth and Development. I think I got it right. And I've been fortunate enough to sit in on short spots of sessions between today and yesterday. And I think that the future of Anguilla looks very bright. That we know, and I think the entire world knows, that this is a very challenging time, but who we are is defined by how we respond in times of challenge. So this is an opportunity for us to really come together, to put our heads together, and to work for the betterment of Anguilla as a whole. And I think that this is the perfect opportunity for us to start forging a way together. So I'll keep my remarks brief. I can always count on being brief after Mr. Hughes. So, so as I'll pass, I don't have to pass the mic on. I'll pass on to the honorable member of the opposition.
Thank you, Ms. Kentish Rogers, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon and to be a part of this straight-up discussions with the youth. As you can tell, I myself am a youth. I am directly one of you. So I'm interested in hearing the conversations that we're going to have today. I'm pretty sure a lot of your issues and concerns are the same as mine. It's interesting times we're living in. Yes, it is unprecedented due to COVID and the global pandemic that's going on. But when we really think of it, the world is now shifting to a paradigm where, for the first time ever, the youth actually have a voice. And not only do we have a voice, because of the shifts, because of the movement towards development, technology, we're now living in a time that is actually, it's ours to take. We are the best persons to navigate the planes that we're currently going through. So it's about time that the youth actually have a meaningful voice at the table. We've seen through past times, we have the older generations always ask us as we come through school, what is it you want to do? Or what is it you want to be? And then they would push us to do it and push us to do it. And then when we leave school and we start talking about all the brilliant ideas that we want to have, or you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't have the experience. The thing is, they have a vision that's different to ours. And our vision for the future, it takes someone with our vision to make it a reality. So we're going to have to take that power into our own hands. It's good to see that this election showed a different shift in the mentality of Anguilla, that they're more open and receptive to the fact that youth do have meaningful ideas, they do have contributions to make. So in that light, I'm looking forward to the ideas that come about from the discussions today and how we can look about to actually putting them in practice to come about meaningful development for the youth of Anguilla. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I am the last speaker, and I know that you are anxious to get the questions going, so I won't delay for much longer. But it's a pleasure for me to be here on day 2 of this National Youth and Development Conference. I sat in on the first portion of the program yesterday, and I could feel the energy and the excitement in the room, and so I'm happy to be back again with you today. This is actually my 5th year of, I was just wondering if it was 5th or 6th, but I think it's 6, but 5 years of being in the hot seat in front of youth, 5 years previous as Minister of Immigration, Home Affairs, Labor, Education. And so I am probably a little happy I'm sitting in opposition right now because there's no doubt that we're in difficult times. And there's so much that we want to do as young people, as adults, as people, full stop. And so with limited means, we have to be able to find a way to still accommodate and push forward despite what limitations we have. Just as I stepped in earlier, in fact, I received a message and a picture from a young lady showing beautiful pastries. They looked lovely, and I imagine they taste lovely as well. And she said that she wanted to start her own business and trying to find ways and means to be able to make it happen. And so, of course, I directed her to the Department of Youth and Culture. And having said that, I want to thank the Department of Youth and Culture for their many years of service and contribution to developing the youth here in Anguilla. And I always chastise them because I say to them that there are so many programs that are in the Department of Youth and Culture that many people do not know. Yes, they advertise, they put it out, they put it on Facebook, etc. I'm not sure if people know that there's a business for young entrepreneurs. And there's a period of training, and after that you receive funding. And so a lot of times when I'm speaking to people, I'm saying, look, have you spoken to the Department of Youth and Culture? No, what's that, where is that, and what do they do? And so I'm putting a plug in for many of our young persons. I think the program goes up to age 35, that they would be able to participate in this program and encourage them to take advantage of the many opportunities that currently exist. There are some programs that, in my view, I feel we need to expand even more. And so, but as time and money become available, I'm sure that the department is keen to be able to expand those programs. But for now, a job well done. I congratulate each and every one of you that have stepped out on your own and seeking to make advances in your own right. And so we are all capable. It is possible for each one of us to achieve no matter what age we are. And I always get butterflies when I sit in this seat because the ideas that come from the youth sometimes throw me off. And I say, okay, well, do I have an answer for that? How do I answer on a very quickly? But it's because you come from a different mindset. Your experiences are different. And so it's an age in which we have to catch up. It's an age when I say we, I'm not in the youth category, so I consider myself in the outside category. But we have to be able to play catch up and understand how Anguilla has changed, how the needs of our young people have changed, and how we can best accommodate and be able to push forward, because it is, in fact, you are the future of Anguilla and the world as a whole. Thank you.
Can we give the elected members another round of applause, please? So before we start, as much as we want to be straight up with our questions, please be respectful to the elected members. They are your leaders, so be respectful to them. My motto for this year is be kind, be kind, be kind, be kind. If you guys want to adapt that, please do. So we're going to go straight up and start the conversation. Any questions in the audience at the moment? No questions yet? All right, we have a question right here.
Good afternoon, honorable ministers and honorable members of opposition. Thank you for being here. Yesterday, we did a critique of the policy. It was a really good exercise. However, one of the concerns that we had upon completing this exercise was the actual implementation of the policy in Anguilla. So based on Pillar 8, I'd like an overview of the plans to improve the institutional arrangements and policy environments which will ensure the implementation of this policy and lead to positive youth development in Anguilla, including reducing the effects of brain drain. improving the institutional arrangements and policy environments for positive youth development in Anguilla.
If I may take an attempt at that, in my previous life as a civil servant, I was given the honor of spearheading a transformation program. And part of that program spoke to the centralization of policy functions across the APS, where we would develop a unit within the Deputy Governor's office that would coordinate policy development across the public service. Unfortunately, we have found over the years there tended to be a lot of silos, everybody operating in their own little space, and that collaboration wasn't there. So that is one of the things that we had in mind, and now that I've come back into office, just yesterday I was reminded the Deputy Governor about some of the things, and I am satisfied that we are well on the way to getting that process rolling again. So I think you'll see very soon a central policy unit within the Deputy Governor's office that will have as a central mandate to coordinate and ensure the development and implementation of policies across the wider public service. So I think that is where your area would fit in quite nicely.
I think that, I concur with what the minister said, but you can see the institutionalization of it has already started. You got the Youth Parliament, you have the Anguilla National Youth Council, we have Department of Youth and Culture, and you know that you guys have basically been pushing for the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 from the United Nations. And one of the, and you have young people in Parliament, so I mean that shows you that this is a serious consideration, that the policies will be made. When we had incident where someone wanted to come in and take over agriculture and commercialize it, and by so doing, well, monopolize would be the word. In Parliament, decisions were made that we would make it so that Anguillian farmers, especially young farmers who have learned the technology and want to be able to participate, and I know one of the policies has to do with food security, or one of the pillars, which you mentioned earlier. And so these are things that an administration has to do. We have to make sure that we put the young people in a position that they have a chance. And if that means that we have to do protectionism, that's not a bad word, because we have to look out for Anguillians first. And so we feel that the young people need to know that an administration is putting policies, regulations, and laws in place that will protect their interests. Because God knows, if we don't look out, then it will be, detrimental, not only to those of us who would have gone on before and our elderly who look to us and to you to take care of them as they get older and pass on from this stage. We have to make sure that the young people are taken care of. So industries, we want you to come up with some ideas, and we certainly have some that we have put forward before of how the youth can become integrated. There's mention of the Get Set program, the manufacturing policy, which is going to come, which will be catered to young people who want to start businesses. We want to make sure that they are, that there will be funding for those who are interested in starting new businesses. And so I agree. And you did mention about, in your question, about how do we reduce the effects of brain drain. And as I mentioned in my opening, it is something that's very concerning. It's something that we have to make sure that we have that reversed, where Anguillians will want to come back rather than leave, where our students who go away to train will want to come back here and participate. But in so doing, we have to make sure that there is employment for them. We have to provide the opportunities, and that is something that we are committed to. So I thank you for that question. It actually kind of puts a nice hard shell around exactly what this administration has as its intentions going forward. I thank you very much.
Just to answer your question in relation to implementation, how do you ensure the implementation of these policies? As part of the National Youth Policy, there is both a monitoring and evaluating framework, which will help to ensure that the decisions that are made are being monitored to see how, number one, how effective they are, whether or not there's need for improvement of any of the policy areas, whether or not we can build on any of them. So it's interlinked, but it has a framework that allows the administrators of the policy to ensure that the policy is working. And part of the reason why it was so important to have a national youth policy was so that, and to have data that backed up the national youth policy, is so that we had something measurable to work from. A lot of times we sometimes can make policies in silos, as the minister responsible for Home Affairs mentioned. And the issue with making policies in silos is that when you look across the government, they don't touch everywhere. But this policy, by nature, has to touch across government office, has to touch across industry. And therefore, the policy itself was mindful that it was necessary to have both a monitoring and evaluating framework, and also having an action plan that worked along with that monitoring and evaluation framework to ensure that we were getting results out of the policy. So that's the answer in relation to the first part. In relation to the stemming the impacts of brain drain, now we hope that the National Youth Policy will, in part, help to stem the flow of young people out of Anguilla, but we do acknowledge that that is a part of Anguilla's history. Anguillians in the 1930s, with the economic depression following the World War, they left Anguilla. In the 1960s, when you had Anguillians going to Aruba and Curacao to work on oil refineries, they left those were younger people, people who were trying to make a way for their families, or saying that they couldn't burden their families any further. They left to make a way for other people. And that seems to be the trend in Anguilla whenever there's economic hardship. So that's why it's very, I think, fitting. Yeah, 2017, when you had the Hurricane Irma, you saw exodus of young people. And now we have 2020, but what's peculiar about 2020 is that you can't leave. So you are stuck here in a country where there's a lot of challenges in relation to creating economic development, because we are resource limited. Now, where you would have in other nations the redeployment of their resources into education, into economic capital infrastructure, thank you. Anguilla's a little bit more limited because we also have debt sustainability ratios to work within. So it's about how do we take our limited resources and make the best use of them to make sure that we get our young people to want to stay here. And that also means creating an environment that they can flourish in. And that, I believe, is the most challenging part, because it requires a mentality shift. And creating a mentality shift we have to work on it together. And if we're saying this is what we're going to do, this is what we have to do to get out of this position, then let's put our heads together and work as one towards it. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'll start on the second half, as it picks off very well from what the Honorable Ms. Kentish-Rogers said. And I totally agree that there has to be a mentality shift. Case in point, we tend to find where a lot of our students who are very bright, who are succeeding, they are discouraged from coming back to Angola, even if they show interest in wanting to do so. Everyone say, but what are you coming back here for? You ain't got no jobs, your degree gonna be useless. And I know this because throughout my own personal experiences, I have faced this several times. I wanted to come back, I was hell-bent on it, but if persons had it their way, I would never have, because they would feel that I would not achieve my true potential here. So we have to eradicate that thinking out of our culture, because the sad reality is it is somewhat infectious. There would be times where it would make me doubt, really and truly, is coming back to Angola worthwhile? And there are several students since, some who I see in the crowd, who I had to talk very hard to convince them to come back to Angola. They talk about all the things that we don't have and how their degrees are going to be useless. But how can we ever introduce these new industries if we don't have the persons with the knowledge, expertise, or the drive to be able to explore them? So I believe that it's not true that there's not much in Anguilla. In fact, when I look at Anguilla, everything it lacks is an opportunity. So every industry we go out there and we see that we want to be a part of in another country, there's no reason we can't bring it here. There's no reason that we can't become the local experts on it or create our new niche markets for us to be able to thrive. But that's where it comes on government now to actually set the framework that empowers the youth to be able to do so. So one thing that I found in returning to Anguilla, for example, even as an island scholar, someone who government had funded to go and do their degree, it was hard for me to get a job in returning home. So imagine what it's like for the students who have to return home, who have to consider, okay, I have student loans to pay back. Because of that, what's my quality of living going to be back? They have to consider their earning potential abroad versus back home. We can't just expect them to come home if it doesn't make feasible sense for them. We have to find ways and means of making it attractive for them to come home, because it's my personal belief that most qualified Anguillians do want to return home. It's maybe not be a popular opinion, but I still at the same time understand why they may not be able to do so. So going to the first part of your question, which spoke about policy and implementation. Something that we're very good at doing in Anguilla is the creation of policy. We come up with some fantastic policies, but as you said, we consistently drop the ball when it comes to implementation. So one of the things that I think we need to do is, from a systems engineering point of view, look at the process. Where do we begin? How do we get to the process where the policy is formed? And where is the bottleneck? Where is the ball dropped between that and implementation? Now, one thing that came up in my parliamentary course, the course on international governance, etc., was the train of thought that institutional development within government starts with parliament. Now, we had a benchmarking exercise of our parliament earlier in this year, and to put it simply and to quote, it's found that the Parliament is wholly insufficient of accomplishing its functions. So if the body that takes policies that are created by government and enacts them into laws, which is supposed to be putting teeth to the policies, putting them into action, is deemed wholly inefficient, then what does that mean for the bodies of government that it then translates down to? Now, the good thing about that is, since the election, following upon the benchmarks, a committee has been formed solely to look at the issue of parliamentary reform, the issue of strengthening our institution of parliament in Anguilla, of which both the speaker chairs and both members of the government and opposition are a part of. So it's something that we're working very tirelessly to do in terms of what ways and means can we go about strengthening the institution of parliament, as well as how do we go about, when we create these policies, it's not just another way of saying, hey, look, we've created this policy, hooray. How do we actually go about putting it into action and bringing about meaningful change? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think that there's much more I can add, because I think that Jose said so much so well. But in terms of the institutional arrangements and the policy environment for positive youth, listening to the main speaker yesterday, I can't recall his name, but he's well renowned throughout the region. Henry Charles, yes. And one of the things that struck me was that the issue that we're dealing with in terms of institutional strengthening, having more say for the youth, etc., is not something that started today, but from as far back as 1965, where it was recognized regionally, internationally, that our young people wanted to have more of a say, they wanted to have a seat at the table. And even though government after government, administration after administration paid lip service, there was actually never anything that was actually done and put in place to say that you can see that there was actually accomplishments and steps made to be able to put it into effect. So when I look at Angola and see how far we've come in such a short period of time and all that we've been able to accomplish, I'm very proud as to where we are. But I do think that there are a lot of issues that our youth are experiencing that we do not know about. When I say we, I mean those of us that are not living it every day, that we may not appreciate and we may not understand. One of the things, for instance, when I was Minister of Labor, that was very difficult for me to come to terms with was that after Hurricane Irma, we had about 2,000 people that were unemployed as a result of the hurricane, and the majority of those people were women. And they worked in the hotel industry, and when the hotels were closed, they were home, and the jobs that were available were construction. And so unless you were a woman interested or didn't mind lifting blocks and doing the construction work, then you were home waiting for the hotels to reopen. And it is at that point it occurred to me that we really need to get serious in terms of ensuring that our people are trained, not just in the hotel sector, etc., but in whatever it is that we seek to accomplish. And the reason for that is that we have to be able to tool ourselves and retool ourselves to be able to go into any aspect of work that we want to. And so one of the things that I think is important is the Anguilla Community College. It's there. I don't think that we pay enough attention to it, and we take up the opportunities that are available. In fact, we had, there is a reduced fee for Anguillians attending that I don't know whether many persons are aware of, but I think it's important that we retool ourselves, that we, if it is, for instance, that we want to do a business in terms of balloons and party decorations, etc., then it's a matter of attending whatever courses are available, ensuring that we are, because it's not just, you just don't drop and create the business, but you also have selling the balloons, but you also have a whole business behind it, the profit and loss and buying all of the equipment that you need, etc., and how do you market yourself. And so there's a whole host of things that I think that when we talk about moving forward and building, that we look at how we can improve ourselves. But from the institutional arrangements, I think that as Jose says, there's a lot of work that's being done from the policy perspective, certainly in the House of Assembly with respect to the creation of legislation and the creation of the various policies that will impact how we move forward and how we affect our youth, how we improve where our youth are able to go. Thank you.
I just wanted to say we appreciate your insightful responses, but it is not a must for every minister or government official to respond, just for the interest of time, to make sure we get as much questions asked as possible. No, but we're aiming to be out at a certain time. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions to ask?
Yes, we ask that you stand when you're asking a question. Do you have a specific, sorry. If you have a specific question to a minister, you're also allowed to do that as well. You can continue, Malik.
Yes. Good afternoon, ministers. Good afternoon, members of Parliament. I actually have a question for Pillar 2, and I'm going to address this question to the Minister of Social Development and Education. The Pillar 2 is optimizing youth and intellectual capital. The Member of Parliament, Honorable Joseph Vanterpool, have also tapped into this. So my question is, currently the government of Anguilla invests heavily in the development of human capital in the form of scholarships, which can exceed to approximately $150,000. How are we ensuring these individuals, when they return, are being adequately used to benefit Anguilla so that we can see a heavy return on investment? I'll repeat the question if you need to. You good? Oh, okay. Currently, the government of Angola invests heavily in the development of human capital in the form of scholarships, which can exceed to approximately $150,000. How are we ensuring that these individuals, when they do return, are being adequately used to benefit Angola so that we can see a heavy return on investment?
Thank you for that question, and it's a really, really apt question because I had just scheduled a meeting with public admin and those persons who were on scholarship or going to university or planning on having that external going out to tertiary education. Now, one of the problems that we've identified from beforehand in relation to using the human capital that they have developed is, number one, is usually utilized for government service. That's number one. When you are developing your human capital and it's only going into government service, that means the reason why government puts it's structured in a way that it's for government service is because government is spending the money, so government wants to take the benefit. And that's understandable. However, government side isn't the only developmental index. The private sector is also a developmental index. So what it really takes is a partnership between the public and private sector to accurately identify the real needs of the island and to be able to place resources where that need lies. One of the interesting, I would say interesting parts to this, to those who go off to tertiary education and they want to come back home and make a difference. And when they come back, they feel as though they wasted their degrees. And that is a very, very common refrain that I hear. They feel as though they're being bottlenecked, to use the phrase that the honorable member stated, and that their ideas aren't being taken on board. That is a training issue that has to be developed, to worked on over time. But to really develop our human capital, we have to start looking outside of the public service, and I have a really good example of that. I had a discussion with my PS this morning, a very brief discussion. I won't bring up all the details. But we highlighted one area of need in Anguilla, which is mental health support services. We have one person in the government service who is trained to deal with it at the moment. That, in a time such as this, is very dangerous because we have a lot of need within our community, within our island for those services, but we don't have the capacity to give or to service that need. And one way in which we could be looking at seeing how we could diversify it, because part of it is the issue that government doesn't even have at the moment the elasticity to bring on more people into the public service because our revenues are short. But if there was somebody who was willing to work in the private sector and to liaise with the public sector to say, hey, we can share, we can recommend clients to go outside the public service and some inside the public service, then we would have a better ability to address more needs. And so it really boils down to, once again, going across the sectors and not looking at it completely from a departmental need, because that's really and truly, that's how it's looked at right now. This department needs that department needs the other. And so we're sitting on a table and we're prioritizing the areas of need based on what the overall priorities for the country's direction. And that is really and truly where we have to move at this point in time. Yeah.
I just want to add a little bit on that. It's going to be a little bit. So here's my thoughts on that. Because over the years, if we do an analysis of how many persons in Angola that have business management degrees, we'd be really blown away. Quite a few people in Angola have business management degrees. But when I want to refabricate, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to always refer to my business to afford. If I want to refabricate the fabric and equipment at my gym, it's a long waiting list because there are only 2 or 3 persons in Anguilla that have the skill set to do that. If I want to do certain carpentry work, the same applies. As it relates to the technical skills, I think we are found wanting. And we find that more so when we have to look over work permits. And we see, for example, Anguilla has a need for elevator technicians, right? There's nobody in Anguilla who's qualified to be an elevator technician. But 20 years ago, there were no elevators in Anguilla. But today, there are a number of elevators in Anguilla, but no one has the skill set to deal with it. So why is it we, as government and the private sector, is not partnering to ensure that we can have 2, 3, 4, 5 persons who are skilled up and qualified to do elevator technology, or whatever terminology they will call it. So what I'm saying is that as it relates to the technical skills, that is another avenue that we really need to invest in. We have invested a lot in lawyers and doctors and the like, but in terms, I see my honorable colleague say, because as you know, she's a trained lawyer, but I've seen lawyers, because there are so many lawyers in Anguilla today, when 30 years ago there were very few lawyers in the teaching profession and other professions because there seems to be a glut. So again, I really think that we need to be, as a country, we need to be investing in those critical needs that we have, and especially in the technical trades, because that's where we find there's a big hole to fill.
I just want to, this is just a footnote. And the footnote is some gentle scolding, because I know that the government of Anguilla over the years has had a scholarship program for those to go off and study and get further education. And there have been instances where people have gotten scholarships and they've not come back home. And the problem is, when government finds the resources to put into somebody's education, that is a need. They're usually putting it in because there's a need for that position. And if the person doesn't come back home, then somebody else will have to be trained. So government has to spend the money twice. So, and more times. And it's not a matter of, we understand that the external circumstances might be better, but the reason for the award of the scholarship is to develop Anguilla. So we need those, and this is a hint for those who are on scholarship now, to come back home. And part of the reason why they may not have been as enthusiastic about coming home is because of some of the issues that we would have identified earlier. The ideas not being taken on board, frustration, etc. But we have to walk through the system together. We are willing to sit down with those who have issues. We're trying to do what we can to make sure that that doesn't remain an issue much longer. So.
I just want to say that I want to thank the Minister of Education for responding the way she has, because in my response, my school would not have been as gentle. But I just want to also add that it is not the case, in fact, that a lot of money has been spent over the years on doctors and lawyers. Certainly there have been many degrees that would have been, many Anguillians who have traveled, and a number of them will receive government scholarship, yes. The issue is, how do we get back, not only bring them back home, but how do we provide opportunities for them? Because if it is that you bring persons back and there's no job available for them, then what is it that they're supposed to do? At some point, they either, and if it is that government is bonding solely for the government itself, and there's no available space, then the next step would have to look at the private sector and allow the person to work out their bond in Anguilla, even though it is not within the government services itself. And then you have those as well that would not have returned, and those persons we need to be able to look and see how it is we can encourage them to come back. If not, the contribution that was given would have been given to build up Anguilla. And at some point, if that contribution is not building Anguilla, then it needs to come back so we can retool, train someone else so that that person can come back and build Anguilla.
Good afternoon. So my question is based on Pillar 1. Financial stability plays a major role within young adult life. I have noticed there is a financial literacy gap within Anguilla. What do you think about implementing a program financial literacy started from the primary school level? And what programs or initiatives do you have planned to address this matter amongst young adults, especially in a COVID-19 economy?
Thank you for that question. You know, that is very important that we tend to teach the 3 R's, you know, writing, reading, and arithmetic, and we forget that at some point, you know, you have to get out there, you have to know how to do budgets, you have to know, maybe that's why, you know, we tend to work with deficits more because we don't learn this early, but certainly, I think that we have to instill, starting early on. I don't know if it starts in, you know, the first grade, but certainly early on we have to let people understand that, you know, what is on one side of the ledger has to balance the other side, and if you know, overuse on one, that you don't get it. And I think that literacy has to be taught. You know, back in 2008, after the global financial meltdown in the United States, they gave scholarships for students and others, those who lost their jobs, to go and do retrain, mostly in the health field, because the feeling was that here's a field people always get sick, so you needed to always have nurses and doctors and radiology techs and things like that. And look how that decision made back in 2008 now impacted this pandemic in 2020, because the frontline workers, and they were looking for these same persons that had been retooled and retrained and to do it. And so what I'm trying to say is that we, as government, we have to know what the needs are. And then we have to train our people early so that we can anticipate what is coming. And the economic and financial, what we put in is what we get out. And I agree with you that this has to start early on. And our administration feels that it's necessary. Now, you know, it is said that we lost financial services a long time ago. And we are trying to bring that back. So we are working with the Financial Service Commission, Anguilla Finance, to pass laws, come up with regulations so that we can make sure that this is now a profession that our young people here in Anguilla, are going to be interested in staying here and developing that. It has not been one of those that has attracted many persons, maybe because it was considered to be a niche a niche industry. But at one time, financial services was 20% of Anguilla's, economy, the GDP. We allowed tourism to go up high because, it was you come out of school, you can go and get a job at the hotel, and even though the wages were not livable wages, they were certainly there that, you could go get a car and you can, hang out and impress the ladies, you guys, and impress the guys, the ladies. And so it was a quick way of making a buck, but not a long-term plan. And so that's why, I feel that even though, Dundon Jim should be sponsoring this session because Hayden keeps going back to it, I think that, he knocked doctors and lawyers and stuff like that. I think those are sustainable jobs, and but I do think that we need to diversify to make sure that we have opportunities for those who are trained in different fields to be able to come back, but also that we start from early, implementing in our persons or instilling in them the need that in a diversified economy we need everybody, and we need different services, and we have to train from early. The mindset has to be there, and then we have to provide the opportunity. So, fishing industry, we know that's industry that needs to be expanded and developed. But why don't we start from early, having persons start thinking about how, in this modern technology that can be applied, agriculture, the same things, and so these are the things that I think are necessary to make sure that our economy develops, but our people, our intellectual capital is developed and fit in appropriately.
Yes. Just to quickly answer your question, I hope. It is very necessary to start financial literacy very early, and I thought it was coming from me. We've seen in Anguilla the results in part of not having the benefit of maybe financial literacy programs earlier. When we look at where we are, just in relation to across the region, when they have things like non-performing loans, or people taking out loans, and they take out loans for larger amounts than they actually can afford to repay on a monthly basis. That's part of managing your finances. So managing it goes down to the practical use of your money as a way to build your family, as a way to build your businesses. You have to walk within, which is something that I keep telling young people who I'm in conversation with. Live within your means, and then build from there. You build capacity. I know sometimes we kind of extend ourselves in order to accomplish what we want to accomplish, which I'm not knocking in any stretch of the way. But I think it's important for us to borrow within capacity if we're talking about lending. I think it's also important that we still have a little bit of an appetite for risk, because business comes with risk. There's no two ways about it. If you're going to get involved in business from whatever age, and I think there's a kidpreneur program, which they start sensitizing young children to what the process of running a business is like, how to manage the money, if I have to buy supplies, and what is my markup on the final product. And all of that is part of building financial literacy. So it doesn't have to be the sit down and just study in front of numbers. It can just be practical. How do we practically involve our young people in those programs? So maybe making it mandatory from a young age that they each try to have a little business to run, even if it's a lemonade shop. You see in the movies in America that they all have these little lemonade stands and they sell cakes. All of that, it might seem very simple and innocuous, but it's very important because it's part of learning how to manage your money, learning how to do better in marketing your business. So I agree with you, it's very important to have financial literacy involved in the schools from a younger age, maybe not in terms of just the monies and the facts and figures, but more in terms of the practical aspect to it. Because if you were never exposed to it, so some people may have come from families that have a business background, and some people may have come from families that have a more technical, they're technocrats. They don't really deal with the day-to-day issues of, okay, how do I make sure that this is happening? So it's important to maybe expose them across the spectrum to the business of business, and then allow them to kind of grow into it. Because I'm a little tentative of just how to say this? I'm tentative when it comes to just increasing more and more programs on our young people, because sometimes we increase and there's no actual productivity from the program. So whatever we're introducing to our young people, I want it to be effective and I want it to be a good use of their time, because we've also seen that in Anguilla and across the region, numeracy scores are low. So that is also an indicator that there is something that needs to be done, maybe to help our students grasp it a little stronger and develop their math skills better. So there's maths, which is what I was talking about just now, and then there's financial literacy, which tie into one another, but they're not completely the same, because understanding business and being able to understand money is fundamental. So whether or not you are in government, you're in the private sector, you have to know how to manage your own money. If you go off to university, you're going to have to learn how to manage your money without anybody's supervision. And a lot of people get into trouble in colleges because they run out of money, they don't know how to budget properly. And so it's important for us as a government to see how we can address these needs, because it might not necessarily mean that they fall on government, but if we don't provide the institutional framework for young people to understand financial literacy, it eventually falls back on government. And we've seen that with the non-performing loans. People's houses are on auction. We have people who can't manage their mortgage payments, and so they go into default, and then the bank takes property, and then they garnish their wages. So it's not a position that anybody wants to be in, but we can help them manage by giving them the tools to understanding budgetary management and financial literacy.
Thank you very much. That's okay.
If I could just, oh, sorry. I didn't realize.
Sorry?
After you, Honorable Minister.
I have more hair than you, so I'll go ahead. I consider myself very fortunate, because I was brought up in a home where I thought that my father was the poorest person on the planet, because he was so prudent and he always taught us financial literacy from kids on up. So it came from home, but everybody is not that privileged. But I remember I Spy, the Calypsonian, may he rest in peace, singing a song many years ago. Don't hang your hat where your hand can't reach. And too many of us have done that, not because of our fault, but it goes back to what you were saying, Disha, about financial literacy. I remember some years ago, Bank of Nova Scotia had a running program where they taught financial literacy. But financial literacy isn't only for those kids and young people, but adults. You know, many of us, you know, we may have attained our masters and our PhDs, but we still cannot manage basic finances. So it is important that that is something not necessarily coming from the educational sector, but holistically from the banks. The banks also have to teach financial literacy. And I think that we'll be a better off for it, because as we all know, we had two legacy institutions that collapsed under the weight of perhaps irresponsible lending, perhaps just not understanding financial literacy. But I just want to say this too. I see many parents giving their children gifts and putting on parties which they can't afford. And sometimes when you speak to them and they say, I want to give my child what my parents couldn't give me, without understanding that what their parents gave them was the love, was the nurturing, and the ability to be able to sustain themselves. So gifts in itself and parties in itself does not really teach a child who is already in struggling situations. They see that their parents don't have the electricity on in the house, but all of a sudden the parent is putting on a lavish party, even in the school with the little gift bags and stuff like that. It sends a message to that child, right? So that is a message to everybody that all of us have to practice financial literacy. And it doesn't only come from what we say, but what we actually do.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I'm happy I let you go first because you gave me a nice springboard. So I was talking to a constituent about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I couldn't help but laugh when they told me of a story of a co-worker asking them to co-sign a loan for them. And they were like, they had to think about it, and they went back to the person and asked the person, but why you really need this loan? Because they were considering whether they should do it or not. And the person wanted a loan to throw a birthday party of a couple $1,000s. So that shows a good example. We really need to evaluate our priorities. I do think, to answer your question directly, yes, I think it would be good to introduce this into the schools, because at some point along the way, they would have picked up more than they would learn if nothing was there before. And whether it comes to managing the finances of government, a company, a business, or just your personal finances, you need to know the basics because the basic principles are the same at the end of the day. And we are talking about having a society where we expand into different sectors. We're talking about diversifying our economy, building up our private sector. But I think one of the fundamental reasons that our young people are afraid to explore entrepreneurial ventures or to create a business or go into the private sector is not because it's a lot of risk behind the businesses that they want to explore, but because they don't understand the risk. They understand, okay, I have my pastries, I want to turn this into a business, but just the thought of the financials behind it and not knowing, it kind of creates a fear within them that makes them more risk averse than they need to be. So I think that if we were to introduce these basics and get them to have a better understanding of finances and say managing money, then they would be more open and more receptive, or even have a clearer idea as to how about going in terms of managing their finances if they want to start a business, visualizing it. We always talk to our children about the importance of saving, but we need to have them actually see it, have them actually practice it. And we need to go beyond that in terms of we emulate the successful people in the world today. We encourage our children to go after them and to try to be as successful as them. But we don't teach them, and I guess it's at times because a lot of the times we don't know that yes, saving is important, but what about investing? So there are different ways of using your money, making your money work for you. There are different ways that if you teach your children how to apply it properly, debt can actually be a tool used to grow a business. Because as long as you're able to grow your business and your financials faster than the rate of debt is growing, then you're able to outgrow your debt. But no, we tell them, don't get a loan, run away from debt, instead of teaching them how to properly apply these techniques to be able to use their finances in their favor. So I do think that, yes, it's very important that they educate them. Educating myself financially is something that I have taken on as a personal responsibility. And so now I'm reading a lot of books about financial growth and management of money, and I would encourage all persons to do so. But I definitely think that our nation as a whole would benefit from pretty much having this directly within our curriculum. That way they can't run from it.
Yes, I agree, and I think it should start from as early as primary school. I think we need to teach our children the difference between want and need and what you're saving for particular things. I may have one child that wants to save money to go off to college, and I have another that wants to save it so that she can buy a fortnight gift card. So, we have to continue. It starts from there, and there's a raging debate about, let's say, the hospitality sector, where yes, the wage is low, but the service charge is high, and there's an argument by some members of public service that private sector do not save their money, so that in difficult times, such as these, they would have nothing saved because they would have spent as the big money came in, etc. I don't know, but there is that discussion that is out there. And the reality is that we do need, as adults, we need to understand the difference between wants and needs as well, and what we're setting aside monies for. And so do we really need a change out of our curtains every season? Or do we want to save our money for something if we get sick and we have to go? There's a very real educational opportunity for us, and there's a real need for it to be taught in our school system. Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable ministers and everybody. With respect to social justice, my question this afternoon, I would like to know if the policy of the Justice Reform Bill will apply to young people that have been incarcerated under the age of 18 and will still be in prison with no chance at freedom unless the parole board decides to. Until then, you will be there. I would like to know.
No, no, sorry? Okay, you can.
I would like to know if the policy of the Justice Reform Bill will apply to young people that have been incarcerated under the age of 18 and will still be in prison with no chance at freedom until the parole board decide to, until they will be there. When will the bill be passed?
Okay, thank you for the question. I believe you're referring to the Child Justice Bill. Yeah. The Child Justice Bill, it's about to go to EXCO for approval to then come for debate as a piece of legislation. So it's in the process. It went through the earlier consultation process this year, and it's now just going through final review. As it relates to your question, which is whether or not those, and just tell me if I'm understanding you correctly, whether those who are under 18 and who are incarcerated will be allowed parole. What am I?
No, the question is, I would like to know if the policies would apply to people that have been in prison before, like under the age of 18. Anybody that under the age of 18.
Okay. Yes, they do. The Child Justice Bill has a number of elements that would also relate to those who are underage and incarcerated while the bill is being passed. So once the bill is passed, if you are incarcerated, it would apply to you as well. Yes, under the age of 18.
Thanks a lot.
And when will it be passed?
Yeah.
Well, it'll be passed once it goes through the House of Assembly. And I'm sure that it's in everybody's interest to ensure that the bill is passed. Yeah. There is a draft of the bill already prepared. We went through the last policy bits in Cabinet a few weeks ago, so it's just going through its final review before it goes to the House of Assembly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, no problem.
Good afternoon. I know we have already moved on from the question, but this was just a statement to let everyone know that there is an actual program that we use in school. I'm a teacher. It's for the financial literacy. It's the program that ECCB offers. It's about a month long. If Minister Kyle was here, he can speak about it because he was actually a facilitator last year. So there is an actual program that we use in school, grades 4 and 5, 6 as well.
Sorry to interrupt. Just to add to that, I just wanted to let the public know that October is Financial Literacy Month, and the Ministry of Finance actually collabs with the ECCB, right? And where they would educate young people about financial literacy. So look out for that next month. Any more questions?
On this pillar.
Oh wait, did you get your question answered?
Do we have any more questions on this point? No.
Good afternoon. This question is directed to any of the ministers. As a country, how do you believe we can tackle gender equality and gender issues? Not only that, but LGBTQ equality and issues, as LGBTQ people face many challenges living in Anguilla, which leads to the migration to where they feel safer and more comfortable. Now, Before any of the ministers tell me that it's a mindset thing, trust me, I know. But how exactly do we tackle that? Because we can't keep something as ignorant as transgender phobia, homophobia, biphobia, keep discouraging our young people. I mean, we could be scaring away the same elevator man we need right now. So I would just like to know exactly how we could tackle it. We keep talking about things like not high enough salaries deterring people from coming back. But this is also an issue that we need to tackle because we are scaring away young people and it is an issue. They won't tell you upfront because sexual orientation is not something that we usually start to have a conversation with now. So, yeah.
Well, essentially, it's a human rights issue. It's not even about a mentality shift. The international frameworks, the regional frameworks, speak very specifically about discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And I know that as a Caribbean nation, a traditional and conservative Caribbean nation, Christian nation, there is the sentiment that we should or shouldn't touch certain topics, but as a nation that is trying to make its way and make its name, I think we have to respect international norms, we have to respect regional norms, and we have to give people the right to exist regardless of their orientation.
So that was a very good question. For many years, I would have functioned in government as the person responsible for gender affairs. And I'm so happy to see the gender development coordinator in the room as well, because somebody reminded me just this morning, it took me about 7 or 8 years of fighting to get that position in place, right? But in my role as with gender, these were the kinds of issues that always came up. And this is why I would deal with it. One's personal belief does not always have to influence what one does on their job, right? And I think a lot of the times we allow our personal beliefs on something to color the way that we carry out our functions. And that's not the way it should be. So I may have, or some of us may have our beliefs as Christians about the LGBT community, but as someone that has worked in gender for many years, I have come to appreciate people for who they are, what they bring to the table. And it's not always that I may always agree with things that people may say or do, but I learn to appreciate and accept them for who they are. And I think that is one of the things that we have to do as a community, be more accepting of people and their beliefs and their religions and what they practice. And I think working in gender for many years has given me that level of appreciation. I think we all have a space within which we all can function. We all can make our contribution in our own ways to the development of this community. And certainly, I have learned to appreciate the value of each and every person and what they bring to the table.
Any further questions?
Before we get into the next question, just to revert a little to the gentleman's question here, and for anyone in the general public who wishes to know, you can check www.gov.ai for a list of the different drafts or bills that have been posted. Dr. Bani, can you please confirm if the Child Justice Bill has been posted there already? The draft?
Oh, sorry, you didn't hear me. Okay. We had a version of the Child Justice Bill earlier in the year that was posted on the government's websites. But following the posting of that, we had several consultations, stakeholder consultations. And as a result of that, we've made some changes to the bill. So the new version of the bill is going to Executive Council next week, and thereafter we will post the revised version for people to comment.
Okay, all right. And also, we are just asking for you to keep your questions to the point, okay? With that said, any other questions? Well, we have one over here.
Good afternoon. I guess my question is towards youth contribution to economics and stuff, but it's also geared towards youth development in terms of economics towards sports. So my question would be, what are we doing for the youths in Anguilla that have talent in all the different sports arenas, but they don't have the avenues to be able to really explore that talent to go further, not just look at it as it's a means for me to achieve a scholarship to get to school, but can I actually make a living off of this? I know it might not necessarily be a government issue in terms of putting your hand in your pocket and paying them, but just forming the partnerships with different international bodies and so forth, that it affords the youth the opportunities to go abroad and be professional. It may not be the NBA if you're basketball, but Europe has leagues, Canada has leagues, Argentina has leagues, and so forth. So I just want to know what's your standpoint and what are we going to be doing in terms to implement that our youth have a future in sports outside of just, I'm getting a scholarship to go to school.
Thank you for that question. Sports is an industry. And getting that drilled into the minds of people starts from primary school, preschool, because that is where you start hearing children saying, what do I want to be when I grow up? A doctor, a lawyer, a technocrat. They might start saying sports, but you hear that starting to ebb away and people asking them to have more realistic dreams. So it's about changing the language that you use with young people when they're really young. That's one part of it. But getting, it's funny that you mentioned paying them, because in most other territories, when sports or athletes, they go off and they represent Anguilla, they are paid to represent their countries. They are respected when they come back from representing their country. I mean, I know that we are not an independent country, but that's not necessarily an excuse, because BVI pays their athletes. They have their athletes when they come back. They give their athletes house, land, car, all kinds of stories. But that might seem like oh, if you have the money, do it, but there's a reason why they do it. It's an incentive. So when you see people recognize your athletes for doing something, then you create an incentive for your other people, other athletes, other young people to say, this is something I want to do. Look at where it has taken X, Y, and Z. And the fact is that even in the professional realm, I know people will see the NBA, Olympics, as the gold standard, but there are leagues underneath, as you said, the European leagues, the Russian leagues. There are players in Greece, all over the world. In fact, Antigua has a program where their footballers, they go through this college in Berkeley in the US, and those athletes, they never usually get up to the standard of Premier League, but they go over into the Russian league. They go over into the Spanish B League, and they make a lot of money. They make a good living from it. It's a living. So for us, it's partially about getting, and I know you said not just scholarships, but the scholarship is kind of the introduction to the structured part of the sport. Because especially in places like America, they have massive programs that are geared towards creating professional athletes. And professional athletes, there are a number of leagues for professional athletes. It's not just the league, there are a number of ins to the career. So we have started working with a number of colleges through some partnerships that we had to be able to allow athletes who might not have qualified, because there are a number of leagues. So sorry, there's Division One in the U.S. where you would have a lot of athletes for the most competitive. Division Two is also quite competitive, but you have a better chance at getting through if you are not the top of your league. And then there are other divisions underneath where if you had a gap between, let's just say, leaving school, because once you leave the secondary system here in Anguilla and you're out, in the US collegiate terms, some of that is space that you should have been in university, so you lose a competing year for them. But once you have the talent, and Anguilla does have the talent, what it really takes is government backing some of those scholarships. And that is what we're working on right now, to enable those athletes who may not have had the first grab of the cherry, but there's still an opportunity for them to succeed. And this isn't necessarily for them to come back and be in government, but this is for them to develop themselves. So we're trying to create the opportunity for them to expand regardless of where they are. And it means that we're investing in our young people and understanding the importance of sports development as an industry. So once we are able to kind of regularize and structure it, and I'm sorry that the Honorable Ministerial Assistant Merrick isn't here, because he has been working overtime on some amazing projects, and given the circumstances, we know, but if there's anything you want to know extra about the sporting developments, you can reach out to the Ministerial Assistant and the Director of Sports, Mr. Andre Collins, because we're really pushing to make sports something serious for Anguilla.
I have always been passionate about sports. There was a time in my life where I thought I would become a professional athlete. And no, this is true. And no, I'm serious. I'm serious. A long time ago, Maria, you should be old enough to remember, but severe shin splints and injuries derailed that opportunity. Be that as it may, I've always been passionate about sports and sports development. But I'm sure some of you in here have gone to the primary school sports and the primary school soccer. And if you go to the primary school soccer in particular, you'll be truly amazed at the skill set that we have in Anguilla. The talent is there. The talent has always been there. I can tell you, I go back to the days of Jimmy Lloyd from Blowing Point and Ras Bucket, and before those individuals, Carly Taffy Richardson, Miss Banks and Zinga Banks. She also was a recipient of a full scholarship through tennis that afforded the opportunity to get a tertiary level education. So, but we have had the talent here in Anguilla. Our own esteemed Minister of Sports was also an athlete. And the Ministerial Assistant, Mr. Merrick Richardson, was a very good volleyball player and basketball player, although height escaped him. but we have always had the talent. And if you doubt that Anguilla has the talent, just consider this. An island with less than 15,000 people, we have one of the best long jumpers and one of the best sprinters in the world. 7 billion people, you know. We have so many athletes in Anguilla. We have persons like Hassan Hennis that have made his mark, just need the support. You know, so we've had primary school kids who have broken Zarnell's record. So what does that say? If a primary school kid has broken his record, it means that he has the potential to even be better. So how do we foster this talent? How do we ensure that this talent reaches the next level? And why is it that so many of our athletes in the primary school are so good, but by the time they're in second farm in Campus B, they're not playing anymore, right? The enthusiasm is not there anymore. The development is not there anymore. So it says that we need to have a meaningful role. There's a meaningful role to play on the part of government to develop sports in Anguilla. And parents need to understand the importance of sports. Just last night, it's so random that you'll ask that question. Just last night I was looking at Usain Bolt in 2016. And in 2016, he made $30 million in 2 minutes and 48 seconds. Just consider that.
I was just going to say, just a quick statement. I actually think that you answered your question in the question, because while I do think it would be good to offer incentives, I do think that the number one way that we could really tap into that potential of our young athletes is by getting them that outside exposure, that outside training. And one way that we can do that is, as you said, by leveraging the partnerships between government and maybe those sporting institutions. But there's also ways and means of us, say, for example, reaching out to non-governmental organizations or pretty much the sports clubs that actually have money that they want to give to these kind of causes. So what alternative revenue streams can we tap into for the benefit of our athletes, et cetera? That's something that's key to exploring. But as well as I think that we need to, again, a lot of things comes down to mindset. If we look at the support for our primary school sports, people come out in their numbers, they go crazy. The Honorable Minister said something happens to our athletes between going from primary school to high school. But if we just look at the support, something also happens to the support. So it's made to seem less important as they advance, but it's as they advance that the opportunities truly come. So there's something about that inverse relationship that we're going to have to fix. And one thing that I think we could do is about putting more emphasis on the importance of our national teams. So I think one thing that was good when we get a lot of the community play in Anguilla, that community spirit, I think that one sport that was very successful in doing that a few years ago, less so now, was basketball. That when a basketball game was going on, everyone going from every village, there was the rivalry in that the villages wanted to win, but there was still a brotherhood that fostered the community spirit among the members of the different teams. And I think that by tapping into those kind of sporting avenues, bringing about the excitement, building those relationships, that's when we can have our national teams really be the best among the best. That's when we're going to have everyone in the different communities aspiring to be a part of the national team, because there's a certain level of prestige that at the moment it may not have. So we have to go about, how do we go about fixing that mindset, that perception, building about that sense of pride in representing your nation on the field. But it's going to be difficult if you're going away representing a national team, you're going out, you're trying your hardest to represent your country, and the people in your country aren't paying attention. I think we, as Anguillians, we are very good at celebrating our successes. The moment somebody's successful, yeah, that's Anguilla. But along the way, the persons who are striving to get there, who may just need the push, the encouragement, we're not there to support them. So we're going to have to find a way of building that appeal for participation among sports in our youth.
I think what is also critical is the development of our facilities. I'm very happy that late last year, I believe, Mr. Evan McNeil Rogers and Cardigan Connor would have signed on a MOU with FIFA to develop our playing fields across the island. And so I'm looking forward to that work being done and the money is being put into the development of those fields, because it's not just during school that you want to encourage, but certainly in the communities and certainly on the weekends, et cetera, and the type of activities and competitions that Jose is talking about. So for instance, we know for the football, it's very active. It has been very active, and a number of people come out and participate and watch. And also basketball, the basketball tournaments that we've been having as well throughout the various communities. And so I'm looking forward to the development of our sporting facilities, because that, again, is another avenue to be able to identify our young potentials. Thank you.
Just to follow up really briefly, I got a suggestion from someone about 2 weeks ago. When I was going through the valley, someone said to me, you need to get rid of Maroon House, Orange House, Pink House, and bring back A, B, and C House. And in the beginning, I was laughing, and I was like, no. But I understood fundamentally what they were saying. When they renamed the systems, they lost the legacy. And when you see the way sports is put on a pedestal in places like the US, it's because of legacy. You see parents handing down to their children, this is the shirt I wore in 1940 something, from, no disrespect to anybody, of course. I'm talking about the time period, but there's a legacy aspect to it that's very, very important. And once you can identify with something, there is that sense of passing down, almost like an heirloom. So for us in sports right now, it's creating the national sports policy and making sure that it's reflective of where we want to see Anguilla. And when we make decisions about where Anguilla goes from here, ensuring that we keep those legacy aspects and bolster the institutional development of the sport. So a lot of the sports, nearly all the sports have official organizations. And the organizations, sorry, not organizations, associations. They all have official sporting associations. And the sporting associations across Anguilla get very different amounts of money from their parent organizations. FIFA gives about $500,000 a year, whereas you have in track and field, they get maybe $10,000 a year. So there's a massive disparity. And what it requires is for us, once again, to come together, because even you look across the board and you know that some sports have resource limits and some sports may have more of an ability to expand. So if we can work together to create something for the betterment of Anguilla as a whole, then it would be better for all of us, because your athletes, you are competing from the same athlete pool in Anguilla, because all your sprinters are also your footballers. Your footballers are also your basketballers. Your basketballers are your swimmers. And so you're competing for the same athletes, and that is why it's really important for us to actually have a proper strategy. And that's where the national sports policy falls into place, because we want to be able to develop it into a proper industry, and there are a lot of avenues, but we have to make sure that it's strategic. So, yes.
Just to add a little bit about the legacies, I was on the A House, and we were winners, and then they changed it to Orange House, and we never won again. So I just wanted to inject that. I traversed both of it, you know, both generations.
While you're getting the next question ready, you know, I was at the UE graduation certificate ceremony the other day, and you know, it was so interesting. You had Dr. Phyllis Fleming Banks, you had Nurse Dana Rowan, and you had me, and we were all A House people, you know. And so when she said bring back A, B, and C, I'm all for that, you know. We didn't win all the time. C House used to win when I was in high school most of the time, the green. But I'd say that is a legacy that we should bring back, definitely. Except Colin Johnson may think that Yellow House, he wouldn't be able to wear yellow anymore, you know.
Thanks for the opportunity to say something. And as I've been here for the 2 days and following up the slides that were presented by Mr. Charles and the others, I know that they have been in Anguilla, and what they brought through is exactly what we are saying. And as the panelists were speaking just now about the sports in particular, when I saw that slide this morning that came up with that young lady on the wealth creation, was it Rochelle? And then you look back and you see that all these were children you knew from the school system. And as you're saying, there is potential in our people, and with all of us working together, we can make the sports and industry in our diversification of our economy. Thank you.
Okay, was one question from yesterday, but since you were talking about sports, I have to say something. The guy who broke Zania's record was actually my athlete, just saying. And it's Sawyer's son. He's very, very good. And it's actually 3 people as well. So the talent in Anguilla is really, really outrageous. We have some of the best runners here, Melter. We went to school together, Delano, a great footballer. But there's a lot of talent in Anguilla, and I really want us to do something to change the dynamic. She also has a daughter who has run. Okay, good, thank you. All right. So, sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm quite nervous to speak, so I would be trembling. What are the plans the government have in terms of sports that are rarely recognized to make them feel like they could go out and represent Anguilla? Example, martial arts. Last year, September, my instructor carried 2 boys and a girl to New York to represent Anguilla, and we came back with 3 golds, 2 silvers, and 1 bronze. What are you going to do to allow other martial artists in Anguilla to feel like they can go out and represent Anguilla as well?
Well, first of all, congratulations. Congratulations. I think it's important that we work together. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. I did not know that before. So I think that's where it starts. I have to be able to know what's out there, and maybe it takes for me to come out and literally scourge and find you guys. But once I'm made aware of new sports, or more sports that are not really traditional in the sense of what's been in Anguilla before, then we look forward to any opportunity to work with them and to help them advance. What we have been doing is trying to ensure that the new and emerging sports, they all get accredited. So if you guys have your sport, we want you to get accredited officially, and that makes it so much easier for us as a governmental organization supporting you in going further, in representing Anguilla, in taking you to the next level. So what I would encourage anybody out there, if you have a new sport, please come forward to the Department of Sport. Let yourself be known, and we will help you in terms of getting accredited with your international organization, because the international organization often offers support in terms of taking you to the next level. I don't know, you can tell me now, I don't know, are you guys accredited with your international organization? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So, well, you're already a step ahead of me. So, it really, in terms of moving forward, I think it just takes for us now to have a conversation into seeing where we go next and how to take it to the next level.
I just want to let the audience know that I have to leave. I have another appointment I have to keep. It was a thoroughly enjoyable afternoon here this afternoon. And for some reason, the questions were very difficult, but you didn't grill us this afternoon. So we are thankful for that. I just want to leave one point with you in terms of the labor market. Because as you know, a lot of our tourism plant has been shut down. A lot of our workers are home, you know. And it would be a good time for us to really get on board with this whole issue of diversifying our economy. You know, we speak about it a lot, but we have seen the brilliant ideas coming forth from our young people in terms of entrepreneurial ideas. And I think I want to continue to encourage our young people that this is the time to let those ideas flourish. Bring them off the paper, bring them out and let us see what we can do to develop your ideas. Because the tourism sector will come back eventually, but I think as persons gain more skills and a wider repertoire of ideas and business ventures, I think it's going to stand Angola well as we move ahead. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
Mr. Hodge, just before you leave, I had a question for you. In 2007, I know OECS, before Hurricane Amadei, started the Building Resilience Policy. And as you travel around Angola, you see that it has a lot of abandoned buildings that are not claimed or whatever the case is. So I know currently Lands and Survey Planning, they have a building code, a building policy.
Right.
So what are you guys doing to address that issue? Because I know it's one of the top pillars in the OECS document.
Yes. So we have two pieces of legislation that have been around for quite a while, the environmental legislation, also the physical planning bill. And so those two pieces of legislation will fix a lot of the issues that you're talking about. Because for a lot of reasons, those pieces of legislation have attracted a lot of comment. I think as Anguillians, quite honestly, we get accustomed to doing things our way forever. And so whenever we try to sometimes put order to things, there's always a little pushback. But we want to bring those pieces of legislation forward again for public consultation again. And I think they are good pieces of legislation because they begin to bring order to a lot of things. In other words, you have a nice two-story house and nice garden and pool, and then somebody comes and puts a pig pen above to the east of your house. You know, these are the real kinds of issues that we are talking about that we have to address. You understand me? And so we hope that when these pieces of legislation come back out, especially young people, you'll take a read on these pieces of legislation and lend your voice to it. Because we have seen in this year, particularly for elections, young people's voices have been quite out there articulating the issues, and we want to see a lot more of that as we move forward. I hope I've answered your question.
Honorable Minister of Labor,
Yes.
I have another question.
Sure.
And this is related to labor.
Yes.
The Labor Relations Act now gives legislative backing to the understudy requirement. We've had some challenges with that in the past, and the Honorable Leader of Opposition may also chime in. I'd like to know what are the plans to ensure that this requirement will be fulfilled, or I would say, how is it going to be policed to ensure that we are fulfilling the requirements of Pillar 2 and ensuring that we are optimizing our intellectual capital?
So that's an excellent question. When we grant a work permit, it is granted on the premise that the skill sets are not available locally. So we grant an opportunity to an expat to come in and carry out those duties with the understanding that they will impart those skills, knowledges, whatever is necessary to an Anguillian. What we are finding out, and for the time that I have been there, is that in a lot of cases, this is not being done. In some cases, the hotel sector, plays what I call lip service to this. Sometimes they put people in these positions that they know can never, ever really properly aspire to the position. Right. And then they frustrate them a lot. And these are the actual issues that workers have brought to us in labor and to me as minister. So what do we do about it? First of all, we have to see where we can strengthen the current legislation. And we have to ensure, whether through policy, regulation, whatever is necessary, to make sure that we give teeth to the understudy program. Because as I have said in my campaign, and I continue to say, I am quite determined that the people of Angola, the workers of Anguilla, must come centerfold of any development we do here. And part of that has to be a sensible training program that really is geared towards building the capacity of our Anguillians. I will tell you the truth, in any of our hotels, the guests will tell you that the main people that they look forward to are the Anguillian faces. You know? So the Anguillians bring tremendous value to the market. And in this lockdown, we are finding that the Anguillian workers are really being disadvantaged. They are really being disenfranchised. They are on the breadlines. And so government has taken a decision not to renew a number of work permits for the simple reason that we need to ensure that we put our people first in this equation. We are not saying that the properties do not have a right to have their specialist skills. We never say that. But we say we have to meet on a level playing field, that they have to ensure that when we give these permits, that they play their role in building the skill sets of our Anguillians to one day hold those positions. So I have been in talks with my labor commissioner and my PS, and we are actively beginning to look at how we can reform the Labor Relations Act, that particular section based on a study, as well as to add additional, whether it be a policy or regulations that will help to strengthen this area. But I am absolutely determined and committed to ensure that that is done.
Thank you. I just want to weigh in on that. And the minister is correct in terms of the work permit for many, many years having a requirement for understudy. The difficulty is that the work permit was not law. And so even though you had the words in the work permit, it was not enforced. There was no way that you could enforce it. And so in the Labor Relations Act that was passed in January of 2019, we made sure that we included the provision for the understudy program so that the preference in the Labor Relations Act is that Anguillians would have first preference. And if it is that they were not as fully qualified as the work permit holder, they would have the opportunity to be an understudy. And from there, certain training programs would have to be put in place. And so the rest of it would have been by policy. Now that you had the framework in terms of the understudy program in law for the first time, we had to create, the next step was to create a policy as to how it would be effected, how it would be governed through the Labor Department, and how it would be enforced. And so those would have been the next steps. I hear the minister would have made statements about amendments and improving it, and so that's certainly welcome. But the fact is that prior to the passage of the Labor Relations Act in 2019, there was no provision for an understudy program at all. And it is true that we have to ensure that we give our people the best opportunity to be able to aspire to those positions. And so sometimes it requires training, sometimes it requires experience. So you may have the paper but not the experience. And so the understudy program allows, if you have training but no experience, the experience. If you have the years of experience but no training, how is it that the hotels are going to ensure that our people receive the training so that they can take up that position? And so that is why each work permit is actually only 1 year, and it's intended that for every work permit you identify an understudy to take over that position. Thank you.
Well, just to further give you some clarity in relation to the understudy program, what we've come to realize is just like everything else, they can pay lip service to certain programs that are being implemented. And especially if it's not within the interest of the organization to do so, you'll find once again that that program being implemented is also lip service. So you'd have an individual, and this has been the case, you'd have an individual who's identified and said as an understudy, you find out that that person never knew they were understudy. So there is a definite disconnection between what is on paper and what is the reality. Because there are persons who have been identified and there's a time frame given and by X, Y, and Z this person should be prepared. they just shift, they move them around, they never give them the ability to actually fill the position. So it's, once again, a case of, I don't know if they say chicken before egg, or, so it really requires some real strengthening to the legislation and to conversations that we have with these corporations, because I know sometimes we look at it purely from a legislative framework, but there needs to be some monitoring. So when you put something in place and you don't know what's going on the tail end, you end up sometimes with you're being played. So we have to be able to move past it, maybe not even to call it an understudy program anymore, to deal with an actual training program to put people in those positions. So if you identify somebody and you say, this is a person, if that person has the experience, what are you doing to provide the training? What are you doing to provide the educational opportunities for that person? If this person has the education, this period is the training period to give them the ability to fill that position. But that's not what's happening. So we need to be able to have very frank conversations about it, because it's not working. It's not working.
I just want to say, I like to pull from my experiences as well. And I have had almost 2 decades in the hospitality sector, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I can say that this understudy program has been around since the 1990s, and has always been a joke. And the reality is it's about opportunity. At the end of the day, it's about opportunity. When you sit down with a developer, for example, you say, hey, why is it an Anguillan that is suitably qualified have not been considered? And that developer said, well, you know, the Anguillan could not speak Japanese. You have to question that, because the reality is that the general manager that is in question, first language is Japanese, being a general manager in Anguilla, and his second language is English. So that is not a good excuse to me, but it comes down to opportunity, and I always liken it like this. Here in Anguilla, we always talk about talent and capacity and ability. And we have lawyers running legal firms. We have doctors running their own private practice. We have 7 permanent secretaries, all of which are Anguillan. We have 5 ministers of government, all of which are Anguillan. And I dare say, all first-time ministers of government. So here is it. You have us, as the ministers of government running a country. We have the opportunity to run a country, but you're going to tell me that in the hospitality sector, an Anguillan can be head of housekeeping? It just don't make any sense. So, you know, so at the end of the day, one of the things is not only the opportunity, but whether or not you have the political will to stand up in the face of an investor who say, well, if you don't give me that work permit, I won't open my property. And say, well, then keep your property closed. You know, so the will has to be there. And it comes down at the end of the day to basic opportunity. Everybody has an opportunity to pad their resume in Anguilla, but Anguillians don't have an opportunity at a job. Just can't work anymore.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a question that would have naturally been for Mr. Kyle Hodge, but he's not present. And it has to do with food security in Anguilla. I'll just ask the 2 questions, and anyone can answer if they wish. Given the reality of limited quantity and quality of land in Anguilla, what are ways of overcoming this challenge to achieve food security? And part 2 of that question is, what funding is available for food security capabilities specific to the Anguillan context?
I will not claim to be Kyle Hodge. As you can see, he's a lot more handsome than I could ever be. But be that as it may, as a government, we have been working as a collective. And I think any of us could really jump in and answer that question as it relates to food security. And we all are well aware that the soil quality in Anguilla is poor. And that is why we have to have the physical planning bill. Because if the soil quality was not poor, all of the land in Anguilla would have belonged to the state. But because it was so poor, The slave masters who brought us here abandoned the land and left the land for us, and we now own that land. So we got to thank the soil quality, because even though it doesn't lend to good agricultural practices, we own the land, at least 95% of it. But be that as it may, I know that this administration, in particular the Minister of Agriculture, Terrell Hodge, we have been embarking on a program of new and innovative ways of farming, not only of the soil farming and so forth, but vertical farming, hydroponics, aquaponics, and the like. And just last week, we were on a conference call speaking to individuals who develop farming practices in Israel. And as we know, Israel is a desert, right? They don't have water, and they don't have soil quality. So we believe what we are embarking upon is how we can train up and skill up our farmers to move away from the traditional farming. And that is something that we are actively doing at this time.
Now, what I would like to know, in addition to that, is what incentives are, how does the government propose encouraging persons to invest in hydroponics and aquaponics as a means of food security? And also, what programs do you propose implementing to get, because you know farming these days is not something that teenagers usually look at. So what is the government doing in terms of education from primary level to get into sparking that interest? Is there anything proposed for that?
Well, I'll respond to the latter half and let Hayden follow up with the rest. But we have, as part of one of the things that we wanted to do, and we're working on rolling out for the next academic year. This academic year is being focused on the catch-up. So what we plan on rolling out is similar to the Hello Tourist program that they would have implemented in the primary school level, where you'd go in and you'd have an experience in the hotels, getting service, understanding what it's really like. We're implementing a Hello Farmer and a Hello Fisher Folk program. So those are going to be rolled out in the primary schools so that they can get a more intimate knowledge of what it takes. They can also participate in projects which seek to alleviate. We're tying it with innovation. And the reason why we're tying it with innovation is because we had, there's a partnership with someone in Kenya, and they have done this incredible little project where they create water from air. So they use the humidity from the air to create water. And we're using that on a small scale. Obviously, it's not something that can sustain farming. But it can help pique the interest of our young people in relation to using innovation as a tool to drive agribusiness. And we want to, once again, we want to keep, there's certain things you want to keep for your people. And in the world at large, we've seen that the instability of coronavirus has put food supply chains in flux, and you'll see countries around the world trying to hone in on their local farmers, their local personnel, to give them the upskilling, to give them the uptraining, to be able to have control of that industry. And that's something that we think is also important for somewhere as small as Anguilla. Even though we don't have we may not have the ability to just expand exponentially because of the limited land space, there are a lot of innovative ways in order to get Anguillians a part of it. So it does take going through the education system, going young to older persons to get them into the program. And that's what we foresee being the most sustainable way of getting them into agribusiness. but that's not limiting them in any way, because it's also about telling people you can own as many businesses as you want. You can be agriculture and you can be other things as well. So we want to be able to make sure that our local persons feel empowered to be whatever they want to be.
Thank you very much for that question. One of the things that we're doing for the traditional farmers right now is better water rates to help them to alleviate and reduce the cost of production. That is one of the things that we're actively doing right now. We have come to agreement between the government of Angola and the farmers as it relates to that, and the water authority. So that is one thing. But even in non-traditional farming, such as aquaponics and hydroponics, there's a need for water. So, but one of the things that we are talking about, and the Premier can speak to, is partnering with Volcanic Institute to upskill our farmers. We have had discussions, meaningful discussions with the Angola Farmers Association, where we have spoken about training and upskilling them in diversifying the way they farm in different techniques and so forth. So that's one of the things that we're doing. I'm not sure, maybe the Minister of Education can speak to that, the former Minister of Education can speak to that, whether or not we still offer agricultural science in the high school. I know when I went to high school, they do.
Yes.
So when I went to high school, that was one of the subjects that was offered. So that is something that I don't know where we are with that in terms of the advancement. I know there was also an egg, a broiler component to it, but there's so much more to farming. And I think, yeah, the Minister for Education spoke about food security and countries around the world defending their rights to food security. We saw recently a trade war between China and the United States over onions and garlic, and that was just fascinating to see how big that was. And just recently we saw another one between China and Ghana on the issue of tomatoes. So we see all of these trade wars around the world over food, and we produce so little of our food. So little, less than 5% of our food we produce. So there's so much capacity there. There's so much ability there. There's so much opportunity there. But as I said, you know, one of the things we talk about training and so forth, but there's a great training tool that all of us have access to, and it's called YouTube. There's so much you can learn on YouTube as it relates to aquaponics and hydroponics, and that has been a tool that I have used, and anyone can use that tool right now and get ahead of the game as it relates to farming and new farming techniques and food security.
Just to finish that up, you know, we are to incentivize farmers. We have to make sure that there's funding, and so we've been talking to persons at the CDB about trying to get funding specific to agriculture, because we feel that not only food security, but also to diversify the economy. These are necessary. Hayden already mentioned trying to control the cost of water. We have a program we want to put in place, grow local, eat local. That's not just because we want to keep our people healthy, but we want to make sure that the farmers have a chance to compete. And so that will require that we do statistics to find out how much the usage of specific, say, fruits, vegetables here in Anguilla that can be grown, meats and things, and poultry, eggs. And then we determine how much is imported, how much we can grow as local farmers, and then we will put in policies that will be protectionist, and they can knock us for that, but we believe that Anguillians first, we will make sure that you know, the hospitality industry, that they would have to buy from our local farmers and fishermen before they can go overseas. We do know we may not be able to meet the full demand, especially since it's seasonal, but we want to make sure that our farmers have the first opportunity. And so these are policies that we are working on, and I think that this will translate all the way down into the high school and primary schools, that there is an opportunity to grow here. We'll be healthier. We'll also have an economy out of it. And then if we grow enough that can't be utilized here in Anguilla, then it can be exported. And we will find markets to make that more appealing to our farmers and fishermen. So I thank you for that question. It's very important to know for young people that there is that opportunity.
Going along seeking opportunity to protect our farmers market here, that in the long run that there be a production policy set in place for farmers in terms of marketing and distribution line for them. Yes. To food security in terms of our farmers. Yes.
What next would, we would also have to be mindful in thinking about the spin-offs. How do we distribute? How do we market? How do we make it accessible, et cetera, et cetera. So those were some of the thoughts that we figured could come into a policy, a production policy itself. Right, what crops?
Yeah, what crops work, what crops don't work, how many can you produce in a given time frame?
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. I really am sad that the minister responsible for agriculture isn't here, because he's been working tirelessly on those aspects of agriculture. We did campaign quite a lot on agriculture, and it is really important because the approach that we've decided to take really is a bottom-up approach, because it's important for us to ensure that those who are already in the industry feel respected. And we don't want to, the last thing you want to do is disrespect those who have been working hard under conditions that are dire and tell them, move over. We have our own ideas for what we bring to the table. So we have been working very hard to see how we can bridge a gap, have some reality checking as well, because we know that we can't produce everything here in Anguilla. So, and this is where having really good regional partnerships step in, because there are other nations, Caribbean nations, who are willing to work with Anguilla in order to bolster our agricultural and food security. So we're doing it on a dual approach in that respect.
Just to add a little bit of what the minister spoke about, we've been meeting a lot with the Farmers Association in pretty large bodies, and they've been basically advising us which crops grow the best at which years, which crops they have a huge market for. For example, when we talk about eggplant, for example, farmers have said, well, initially we grew a lot of eggplant, but there was no market for the eggplant, so we cut back on the eggplant, we grew more tomatoes, we grew more beans, and so forth. So they have been helping us a lot in terms of advising us and letting us know what it is there is in the local market. But when you speak about production, I really didn't understand the question, because one of the things when we talk about production as well is that how do you take those excess tomatoes and make other products? Whether it's tomato paste, whether it's tomato ketchup, and this is why we're actively working on ensuring that we have a manufacturing legislation and a manufacturing policy. Now, the manufacturing legislation and manufacturing policy envisions that persons who want to go into manufacturing such as that, whether they want to make ice cream or soaps or whatever it is they want to manufacture here in Anguilla, they are incentivized by tax concessions for multiple years, up to 10 years, in order for them to grow and develop their business, have that umbrella so that they can grow and develop their business and so forth. So these are the things that we are actively working on right now. Some work has already been done before. 2011 to 2014, there was some work done, but we have picked that up and we are really enhancing that now so that we can go to the House probably in the early part of next year to do that. One of the other things that we're also working on is amendment to the Trade and Business License Act. And that is because we are not doing anything different to any other country in the world. Every country in the world has sought to protect their local enterprise, their local business. And this is what we are seeking to do. Yes, we have lost some of those areas, but those that we have, we want to protect for Anguillians for generations to come. So those are things that we are actively working on at the moment.
Good afternoon. So my question is in relation to the arts. What are the plans for students to build exposure in the arts regionally and internationally? You heard me? Everything? Yeah. And will there be more concentrated development of the arts to include scholarships? That's it.
Yeah. The arts. When you speak about the arts, I always giggle because this is something that I hold dear. And in my past life as a parliamentary secretary responsible for tourism, we did a lot as it relates to the arts, local artists and developing local artists and so forth to give them opportunities at international exposure. And we embarked, I remember some years ago, we embarked on a program called Songs of Anguilla. And what that would have done, we had partnered with Kida Massenberg, who was the president of Motown Records and Sony Records and Kida Entertainment, and came to Anguilla and we signed 16 artists and bands. And every year we'd have rolled out a Song of Anguilla. So by using that vehicle and his connections, we would have been able to promote the arts and entertainment. And I am very sure by now we would have had some of our artists receiving international exposure out of that. Deanna Mussenden, for example, she's one who benefited from the arts program that we had back then because we were able to facilitate a number of recording moguls from Columbia Records and a number of other, there were I think 10 recording executives that came to Anguilla for an expose, if you want to call it that. And out of that, she now has been signed to certain record, I don't want to call it a record deal, but you know, within the arts, so she can derive benefits, economic benefits from that. So this is something that we want to really embark upon again. And it's not only the performing arts, but also the visual arts. We have so many talented musicians and artists. Just the other day we went to the soccer and I saw Daryl, is that his name? While he was painting, Mr. Edwards was playing the saxophone, and it was just beautiful. Two different type of art forms, but both arts in their own right. An excellent production. So the talent is there, and it's how we can take that talent and export that talent. If you look at places such as Jamaica, for example, what is Jamaica's biggest export? We might say tourism, but really and truly, their arts and their sports. We all know about Bob Marley. Who is Rihanna today? You know, Rihanna is a Bajan lady who has taken over the world and one of the highest paid artists around the world. But not only does Rihanna benefit from that, but Barbados also benefits from that, you know? So the talent here is immense. We have so much talent here in Anguilla. And how is it that we export that talent? Because you're exporting that talent, but at the same time, while you're exporting it, you're keeping it right here in Anguilla. And these become ambassadors for Anguilla.
Go ahead. Yeah. So I get to answer the fun part of the question, which is about resource capital for the culture and the arts. I'll be very frank with you. At this point in time, in Anguilla's economic positioning, they do not have the finance or the capital to be able to provide the kind of scholarships that we would like to see right now. But that is not to say that it's not important to have or to develop that sector in Anguilla. It's just the unfortunate reality right now. And I wouldn't want to come here and say, yeah, we're going to have the arts. It's very easy to say that and to look into somebody's eager face and be like, yeah, we got that, we got you, we'll do whatever, and then not be able to deliver. So really, right now, that at this particular point in time would be a difficult investment. But with the kind of capital investment and economic growth that we want Anguilla to experience over the next 3 years, it is definitely something that we would want to incorporate. So it's not all doom and gloom. I would hate to just say that it's not possible, but we have to work on it together. So it's also about us making sure that when we are trying to grow the industry, that we show Anguilla why they should come along with us. And I think that Anguillians have really done a really good job in showing why the creative arts industry, the creative industry is an industry to invest in. For example, next year, the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary has declared her intention to make next year the year of the creative industry. So she is embarking on a number of very ambitious initiatives, including the development of a fleet of legislation in order to provide the framework for putting that in place. That being said, with the legislative framework and the drive to create that industry, we also need the capital investment to put into that industry, to back our citizens when they're going into the industry. And on the tail end, provide scholarships. So it's a multi-pronged approach that we do recognize is important. Because of the dire financial situation right now, it's not possible this year, but it's not off our books, and it is definitely on the table for the government of Anguilla. So I hope that answers your question very honestly, and I hope that it still provides some hope for the future.
Okay, before we move on to the next question, I just want to recognize the Honorable Deputy Governor, Mr. Perrin Bradley. He's in the building. And and also to just let the audience know that we will be taking 3 more questions because we are winding down to 4 o'clock. Okay? Who's next?
I kind of wondering if it makes sense to ask my question because she kind of touched on what I wanted to ask. I mean, you spoke about the finance, and I understand with the COVID-19. How do I reword my question? Okay, so you spoke about the focus. Me personally, I would like to know if there's any specific, not just ranging all over, because we talked about sports, we talked about singing, there's also actors, there's entertainers, crafters, carpenters, everything like that, in that creative sector, that we can also compete, just like Zanel and the rest, and be recognized on the international stage, as well as preserving our culture here locally. Me, I can only speak for me, I know, whereas right now I'm trying to, get other younger persons into preserving our carnival, our costumes. There is something I learned, I'm not originally from here, but when I first came here, there was something called Mayumba, with the dancing and the dresses and stuff. And it's still a thing, right? But the only persons I see doing that is the older people. They are the same faces that I saw when I came here. I have not seen any single younger person my age learn or actually being added on to that same team of dancers that are still dancing. Is there any specific focus on that in terms of the arts and others like that?
That's a great question. And I'll partially answer. I know that the...
Yeah, I was just about, I have a friend, Leonard, commonly known as Charlemagne the God. And he said to me some time ago that if you have a cell phone, a smartphone, and you have access to internet, you can become an international star. If you understand what I'm saying, as an artist, as a creator, a cell phone and access to internet and creating your own content and acting and so forth. You know, this job is very stressful. In the evening, sometimes I go home and I go on Facebook, and there's some people that I follow, Big Jar, and all of these comedians and so forth that do their own little comedy skits. And out of this, they have developed a huge following, and out of that following, they have had international ads and so forth and so on. So if you have a smartphone and you are creative, there's so much that you can do. Even as it relates to the performing arts and artists, back in the day, when record sales was a thing, companies will sign an artist and they will develop an artist, and then they will bring that artist to market. Today, that artist have to develop themselves, develop a huge social media following, and then, so the model has changed, and we cannot limit ourselves to persons creating opportunities for us. We have to be able to create opportunities for ourselves. If you have a smartphone, you know, good picture quality, and you have an idea, you can really do a lot with that.
Yeah. Nobody claps for you, Hayden. It's okay. I think what's very important, especially in the arts, is preserving culture, and to get people to appreciate. I remember very distinctly having a conversation with someone who said, Angola doesn't have a culture. No, seriously, you hear that all the time. You people tell you that the culture is, when you ask somebody what's the culture, they're like, Ayalad. And you're like, that's not the culture, that's linguistic. It's very different from the culture. And part of that stems from not having a very firm understanding of your history. And when I think of the education, I'm not faulting my education, I just want to start with that. I am not faulting my education. When I reflect back on my history, and I think about what I learned about Angola's history, in the 1967 revolution, I learned that. It was impressed upon me time and time again, and I get it. I understand. We had a revolution. However, when I read Bless Our Forebears by Carville Petty, it was like a light switch went off. Because when you learn about the sacrifices that people in Angola have made to stay here, when you learn about what we did, what we said, how we moved, and it goes past the 1960s. We have a history that extends as far back and comes as far forward as 2020. And what we have to learn is how to appreciate all aspects of that history. So Angola Day isn't just about the revolution. It's about where we are, where we're going, where we were, and it's a reflective process, of course. And never mind. Okay, never mind. But it's part of knowing your culture and being grounded in that culture is why you can see places like Jamaica, in terms of them really being very involved in the arts. Part of that is historic and cultural knowledge, a knowledge of themselves, a knowledge of the people. What they learn is what they write. So I remember in sixth form, I don't know if you remember there's a textbook in literatures in English that's not a novel, that is a Jamaican piece of literature. And there's a lot of Jamaican Creole. And you flip into the book and you're like, but you don't relate. There's no critical analysis of Anguillian literature in our schools. And that is problematic Because if you're not creating and talking about your own culture, then you can't disseminate it for other people to enjoy. So that is part of that is coming through the education system. I have been beating down on getting Bless Our Forebears to be a required and recommended text in our schools, in our history lessons, so that we are grounded in our history. And there are a number of other pieces of Anguillan literature that I think should also be included. And that's something that I am currently working on. But as it comes down to projects, art projects, there is, when you look at Netflix, for instance, and it's kind of a pseudo-independent network, and there are a lot of films that are standalone but come from the perspective of that culture. The people in that film are from that culture. If you can create an independent idea and execute it and then pitch it above you somewhere, I know it takes financing to develop these projects. And what I can say now is that I will actively try to find funding for those projects to be developed. I will actively search for it. Because I believe that those projects are important in bringing your people together as well. When a piece of work that comes up and it says, made in Angola. We know how Anguillans get made in Angola. There's nothing was ever made before this. There's nothing ever existed. But it's, and that's a beautiful part of us as well. So what we do as a government is try to facilitate it, try to access the finance and work hard to access the finance for you to execute those dreams, and to platform you onto higher heights. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ministers. Thank you for your time. I'm going to give a shameless plug here. My name is Ariel Gaskin, and I am the chair of Inspire Community Group. Follow us on Instagram, Inspire_AXA, and Inspire Community Group Angola on Facebook. My question, I think, maybe for the Premier, it's two questions, I think. The first one is that as someone who is about to graduate into what I dare say is a COVID-19 economy, my job prospects may be bleak. What are the plans to stimulate job creation in Angola and to address current unemployment rates? And my second question is, I know we've seen the reports, I think it was last month, that the UK has entered into recession. What should we as young people or even as a nation be doing to prepare for the looming economic crisis and recession? It's here, yeah, so.
Thank you for that question. I think it's very enlightened. And as a young person, these are the things that you have to think about and that we as a government have to wrestle with. In terms of job creation, well, we know that this COVID has put us in a position where the hospitality industry has taken a hit. So we have to find other ways to do work. And that's going to entail, expanding in the healthcare field, and this necessary because COVID is something that we have to learn to live with. It's not going to go away now. We have certainly been lucky to not have any new cases since March 26 of 2020. And but as we go to this opening in phases, there is a possibility that we will import COVID-19, and we have to make sure that we have protocols in place to decrease the chance of community spread, because we know that our healthcare facility can only accommodate a certain amount of the disease if, God forbid, it comes. And so we have to think about new job opportunities, and that will entail in the healthcare field, in education. We have to make sure that We have niche industries that will open up. As you can see, with all the necessary hygiene measures, there are, different job opportunities that will come about from that, how to, disinfect, how to clean areas. We have to make sure that there are persons who are trained in this. We have to also make sure that we have an economy that can survive. And in agriculture, we know that now we have to grow our own. As we talked about earlier, food security is important. Fishing, this is one time when we realize how important our fishermen are, because they can then go out, have their catch, and then it's sold locally. Before, they would think more about they had to sell to the restaurants and the hotels. Now they have to sell to us. And so that is something where, others may be encouraged to do that. We have to do our own processing. So we now know that we have to move towards fish processing and marketing. And so these are new job opportunities that will come on board. We have a lot of land in Anguilla that is unused. We have to make sure that young people can have the opportunity to build homes or to have homes built so that they can then move into. And so we have to ensure, the construction industry is maintained, and so that will continue to provide jobs, because when this Anguilla program is done, the schools are finished building, the health centers are done, then there'll be a void in the market. So we have to come up with ideas to do this. We want to open up our financial industry so that persons can work in those fields, whether in the marketing of the, registering companies, or, we have the other where we want to open up to persons coming here so that they can work from here, and the digital nomad program. We want to also have the special economic zone where persons, where businesses can set up here in Anguilla and hire Anguillians to work in those industries. And so they will be in the tech industry, they'll be in marketing, they'll be different areas. And also, as with the question earlier about the arts, the visual arts, the entertainment arts, creative arts, these, that field, which is one that, I know the Vanderpool, he's into the, internet and that type of field there, which I don't find it very sexy myself, but, we do have persons who are into that, a parliamentary secretary, and so these are the things that we want to continue to make sure that we encourage persons to get involved in those fields. One of the things that I think that is going to be useful as we go forward is to have the vocational VOTEC, where we expand that so that not only in the high school but also in the Anguilla Community College, that we make that. We also want an apprenticeship program where persons who are out of school already can meet with someone who's trained in a specific field, and they learn that trade. And what we want to do is to give stipends to the persons who are learning, but also, we want to give stipends to the persons who would be training them, so that we incentivize that program. But as I was saying, in the technical field and apps, we feel that there are a lot of Anguillians who have the ability to create apps. We want to give that opportunity, and so we feel that it's necessary to set up a center where persons can then go in and they produce apps, create these, and then we know that apps can become a means of making lots of money. With that, we also have to make sure that we develop where the royalties and the legislation to protect the persons with their creativity, because it's important that persons don't lose the ability to make the money from their intellectual capacity. And so that is important as we go forward. So there are lots of things that we are right now entertaining, that we're talking to experts in the different fields about, because as the minister said earlier, we don't have a monopoly on all the ideas, so we talk to everyone. We want to get more involved with the young, so that your ideas that can be formulated into policies and legislation that will protect your interests going forward. And so, as you can see, there are a lot of things, even call centers. We feel that that's also an important way that young people coming out of school can get an opportunity to work. And you need persons who are good, have computer skills, internet skills, who can do that type of work. But we're going to need persons who work, persons to supervise. You're going to need, managers, and that way the pay scale goes up. And we're also looking at renewable energy, and we want to make sure to introduce that. And we know that high-skilled jobs in renewable energy will make, a good living for those of us who decide to stay in Anguilla, and those of us Anguillians in the diaspora who come back to Anguilla. So I hope that kind of gives you, my scattered thinking, because we have to think outside the box. This is 2020. We have a pandemic that's on us. We're still recovering from Irma in 2017. We're still recovering from the global economic downturn in 2008, 2009. But we want to make sure that we get Anguilla to a point where we have a reduction in debt. And this is something that we have to aspire to, that we meet our borrowing guidelines by 2030. The United Kingdom government, the taxpayers who've been good enough to us to have helped us to recover from Hurricane Irma with the Anguilla program, who have helped us during this time with financial support because of COVID-19, we cannot continue to rely on them to spoon feed us. We have to do for ourselves. And so as we go forward, we want to make sure that we as a people, and as the Minister for Social Development and Education said, Anguillians are resilient people. And if you look at our history, that we have always found a way to claw our way back to that we became, sustainable, and we maintained ourselves and our families, and this country will continue to move on. And so that is what it requires. And so one of these days when you are sitting in this chair in my position, maybe, in the next 15 years, you will understand that you have to preserve the country, where you live, and make sure that you that you go on to make sure that you look out for your children and your children's children.
I was laughing because I'm looking at Ariel and Malik, and I'm thinking the premier said 15 years, but they're probably thinking 5. But I've had the privilege of traveling with both Ariel and Malik, and I try to coax them into the hospitality sector. I don't know if you remember those years. So we've had some good times together. But just to add to what the premier said briefly, is that we really want to embark on a renewable energy transformation in Anguilla. We spend $1 million a week on diesel to fuel Anguilla. $1 million a week. Think about that. So we can invest in the renewables and really truly have a renewable energy revolution, where we derive a significant portion of our energy from solar, from wind, from even hydroelectric, such as Jibri. And that is why Jibri, he's also a member of the Anguilla Electricity Board, because you want to bring those ideas to the fore. And so if we can reduce our reliance on imported fossil fuels, that in itself will ensure that we keep that money within our economy. And one of the things, Ariel, that you and young people such as you have really come, I don't want to say at a bad time, because even if you look across the world, economies are collapsing across the world. In Africa, where 7 of the fastest growing economies were, those economies are now in decline. In the United States, there are 54 million people that have either lost jobs or underemployed. 29.1% of those people are in the hospitality sector. That's significant. That's a significant portion of their workforce. So the opportunities for jobs around the world have diminished significantly. So how do we use our intellectual capacity now to be more innovative? But the opportunities are there, and I spoke to one of those earlier in terms of intellectual property. And one of the things that we have to embark upon too is ensuring that we have intellectual property legislation to protect your intellectual property. Even as it relates to our artists, right? Where they can copyright their songs, they can copyright their music, they can copyright their designs, and so forth. So these are things that we have to embark upon. And the Premier spoke about digital nomads. So what we envision, and we're going to roll that out next week, is persons, I'm going to just throw some words up there, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, I know Mark Zuckerberg said that if you move out of California, he will reduce your pay. But be that as it may, those people who want to come to an environment like Angola that is safe, provided that you are medically cleared from quarantine, you can come to Angola, and over the next year, you can work from Angola. You know, and there's some benefits to that, not only for you as an individual coming into this environment, but for us and our people who have properties for rent. And the restaurants and the car rentals and all of those agencies will benefit significantly from that. And the biggest beneficiary of that is the government of Angola. Because for every person that comes into Angola, and that consumption, whether they're going to the grocery store and we receive the money on the front end, not on the back end, from importation duties of they driving a rental car. And every gallon of gas, I don't know if you know this, but every gallon of gas pumped, $4 goes into the coffers of government. So the more they drive around inside Angola, the more money government pulls from them. So there's a number of areas and opportunities that we want to create, but it isn't only what we want to create, it's about what you want to create. What you want to create. So what you want to create, you have to come to us and say, hey, this is something that I want to create, but we don't have the legislative framework in Angola to facilitate it. I want to make an example of that. Some years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, a young man came to me and he said, I want to create a business for myself. So I said, what business? He said he went to St. Martin and he had so much fun doing paintball. So he had half acre of land, of his family's land, and he wanted to set up paintball in Anguilla. So when he came forward, wanted to set up the paintball in Anguilla. He could not embark on that business venture because the legislative framework that we have prohibit him from using the guns because those guns fall into the category of real guns, so he could not embark on his business venture. So he moved to England. He was so frustrated. So it's how you can bring your idea to us, and then we look at tweaking the legislation, amending legislation, or even enacting new legislation, a new policy framework to ensure that your business and your idea can really have a tangible impact on your life and the lives of others, where you can create not only for yourself but employment for others and tax revenue for the government of Anguilla that can then send someone off to school to return to Anguilla to continue the cycle. So I don't know if that helps any.
If I may just tag in. The Honorable Premier would have mentioned that there are some of these areas that I would find more sexy than he does, especially the ones with the technological appeal and... Sorry? Sorry?
I was going to say, you could wait for the last question. I think this would be geared towards you.
Okay, I just wanted to touch on something quickly he said that I didn't know though. I'm happy to hear the government embarking on initiatives such as bringing in the digital nomads, etc. These are all initiatives that I think are important to Anguilla's economic development, especially at these critical times. What I was pleasantly surprised to hear about that I did not know about before was that the government is intending on pretty much opening a facility for training persons in these digital skills, coding, etc., if I understood correctly. I am happy to hear that, but as I've said time and time again on the political platform, it takes more than just government to make any of these things work. It takes public sector, private sector participation. So I was very much happy to hear you talk about, I know your passion for art. You wanted to bring together all the young artists and try and get something going there. Malik, Ariel, I admire what you guys are doing with the Inspire group. It's about us getting into the communities and doing, like pushing for the change we want to see. As you said, be the change you want to see. And one of the ways that we can do that is, as the Premier said, we have a bunch of coders on the island, and whenever I would talk about coding, teaching people how to code, spreading the skill sets, they would always talk about how can we get involved, what can we do to really do this? But it's about getting out there and actually doing it. And I want to give a special shout out to the Department of Youth and Culture. They approached me this summer for their Summer Youth Escape program and asked me to facilitate a one-week introduction to coding and app building course. And these are the kind of programs we need, actually get the kids exposed and teach them hands-on. And it was a program that was co-facilitated. I reached out to Gino of Thoughtful Digital Agency, Gino Webster, and we put on the course for the week. And it was interesting because it's these kind of collaborations of like minds coming together where he told me about Thoughtful Digital Agency is about to embark on a program called Thoughtful Labs, where they go about teaching these skills on a regular basis, whether it's every Saturday morning, to the different youth in the community or to anyone who's interested, really. And it's not always going to be teaching. It's about whether it could be mentoring, whether it could be giving speeches, whether it could be encouragement about how to build networking. But this is also in line with something that a company that I am in the process of currently forming for myself, a personal company. This is also one of my dreams and visions. If I'm not in the executive side of government, I'm not a minister of technology, but that doesn't mean that I can't have my impact. So one of the goals and part of the vision of my company would be to build upon that digital capacity of our people. How can we empower them? So I'm very happy to see government participating from their side, because there are persons like Thoughtful Digital Agency and there are programs that will be coming out soon by, for example, my company in collaboration with them, that directly target these same factors from the private sector. So what I would want to encourage more persons to do, those fields that you're passionate about, yes, I expect you to be a thorn in government side. We need to make the noise, we need to get the action, we need to see from our government, the interest and investment in our people there. But from the private sector, we also have to pick up the slack. We have to play our part in implementing what it is we can do. So I just wanted to share that, let people know that to look out for something coming soon. And I just wanted to give that shameless plug to the Department of Youth and Culture as well as to Thoughtful, so that we can promote on building more and more of these programs. Malik, I can give a shameless plug to the thing you got coming up soon too, but I'll allow you to do that. All right, thank you.
So thank you for answering my question. He answered my question before I even asked it.
Out of curiosity, what was the question?
As presently we're reviewing the OECS policy, yes I can, yes I earn, yes I learn. I think this morning the presenter, she touched a bit on it. So in going through the policy, because it's for the whole OECS, but I wanted to know certain stuff that would really relate to Angola. So there's an urgent need and facilitation for the development of technological literacy to prepare young and older persons for 21st century careers, for them to take advantage of regional and international markets. So what ideas would you guys have in place, and by when can we see those ideas enacted?
So yeah, I'm happy to have already answered your question, but just to add on, we need to encourage our people to take advantage of the opportunities that already exist. Recently, I would have been approached by the Anguilla Community College. They wanted to facilitate a new BTech course in IT. It was never done before. They wanted to introduce it. They approached me about being a lecturer and a facilitator for the course. I happily accepted. But to this day, one of the issues that they're having is interest, registration, persons actually signing up to take the course. So it's not that there are not opportunities out there to help persons build their capacity, such as their digital capacity, their computer literacy. Some of the topics that would have been covered in this course are working in the IT industry, pretty much practical skills associated with that transition, that shift. But our people have to also get out there and take advantage of these opportunities. just to answer, maybe the community centers might be one of the better suited places for that to take place, just to keep the separation between the schools and the students and the adults. But I definitely think that facilitating those courses for persons, whether it's parents, whether it's older persons in the community, to be able to get familiar with computer literacy as a whole, it needs to happen, and it's one of the courses you can expect to be coming up.
I was going to say something, but I don't want to keep people any longer. The premier is telling me to hurry up. Yeah, but I'd simply put it like this as well. It also involves us retooling and reimagining what we want to be. There are a number of individuals who are now, even in the COVID environment, creating industry for themselves. So they're going into mobile massages, or they're revolutionizing in relation to the delivery of legal services. Now, when you're operating in a capitalist society, which we are, you are always competing globally. So when I'm competing globally, I'm trying to sell to the world why choose me rather than him or anybody else. And it's important for us to kind of take hold of that competitive marketing and branding to be able to put our individual stamp to it, because we do have something to offer the world. And that is, I think that's a call to action for our young people, for us to put our stamp on what we're producing for the global market to consume. Because what Jamaica is offering for them to consume would be different to what we are offering. And I think that what we are offering is something of value. So that's my call to the young people here, listening everywhere in Anguilla, for us to come to action and us to put our individual stamp and us to get into the market and us to become owners and not just employees.
Okay, so we have now come to the end of our Straight Up Conversation session. We'd just like to thank the ministers as well as the members of the opposition for taking the time to come out and hear our concerns, hear our interests, and answer our questions. I would also like to thank the audience for coming out and asking questions. This event was coordinated by the National Youth Ambassador Corps. And like my friend Ms. Gaskin, I would like to take the opportunity to tell you, please go on Facebook and like our page, Angola National Youth Ambassador Corps. Also, I would just like to recognize those ambassadors that are currently in the room. Can you just stand so that the public can see who you are at the moment? Yes. Thank you. All right, so thank you once again, and it was a pleasure being your moderator. I'll now turn this over to Ms. Robin, Jolene Robin.
Good day, everyone. Protocol has already been established. We are now to the end of our National Conference on Youth and Development, which was held over a 2-day period. Considering the challenging times that we are in, we are grateful for the support of the government who provided the funding for National Youth Week and all its activities, and the attendees. Thank you. Thanks to our main facilitator for the National Conference, Mr. Henry Charles, and our presenters from today, Lane Robinson, Michelle Smart-Bradley, Lily Yu, Yoshabel Durant, and Kimberly Gittens. Special thanks to our inmates from HMP. It's always a pleasure to have you as part of us. Now the work begins. As a beneficiary of the National Youth Policy, you are now tasked with remaining connected with us so that you can follow through to the process. Be involved, be responsible, let your voice be heard. We've discussed many plans over the past 2 days. Now it's time to execute. There are numerous programs at the Department of Youth and Culture. There are programs for the unemployed and at risk, the entrepreneurial minds, the overachiever but still unemployed, and I urge you to drop by to have a discussion with us. Youth Weeks continues for the remainder of the week until Saturday, 3rd October. Tomorrow, we will be celebrating Caribbean Youth Day, which will be held at all local primary schools. On Thursday, we will be celebrating open mic. On Friday, we will have an official sit-in of the Anguilla Youth Parliament. And on Saturday, we will have the ANYC Amazing Race along with the 6th Annual National Youth Awards, where we will be recognizing 13 young persons for their contribution towards youth development. This is one of our biggest highlights for National Youth Week, along with our national conference on youth and development. And this year we're expecting to have a real packed room. So we're encouraging you to come early and have a comfortable seat, or you can join us via our DYC Facebook page. I'd also like to say that as young people attending the youth conference, feel free anytime to stand up and put in that shameless plug for your organization. That's the purpose of the conference, to get connected and to remain connected. Thanks to the National Youth Week Committee, the Anguilla National Youth Council, and the National Youth Ambassador Corps. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to a continued positive relationship with each of you as we continue to serve you. Have a safe evening, and we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the week. I'd also like to thank in Anguilla for their patience and their commitment to this. I think that they've really went all out with us this year. And Calavan for his skills and for being here with us over the past 2 days. Calavan is the photographer from Limitless Shots. Thank you, everyone.
Has the future ever come through the efforts of one? It is and always will be that of a collective. As youth, you are, we are, the future. Yet, we are guided by our beliefs, molded by our parents, driven by our passions, and taught by our seniors. Our shared purpose: to ensure a future for the future.